I walked out of Haicheng first prison today. The guard told me to be a good person. I didn't look back. I just asked him if I looked like a bad person. He had nothing to say. I smiled, took one step forward, and flew into the sky. I could hear him gasp behind me. He finally realized I was a Grandmaster-level warrior. I followed the address my first Master Qin Tianlong gave me and found a tiny bar called Dragon's Roar Tavern, hidden on Flower Street. A whole street of flower shops with just this one bar tucked away in a hard-to-find spot. Inside were only 5 tables in a dark modern style. A middle-aged man was wiping glasses behind the counter. He said they weren't open yet. I told him I wasn't here to drink. I was here to find someone called Ghost 7. He looked up and smiled. I am Ghost 7. That surprised me. I couldn't sense any cultivation energy from him at all. I thought he'd be a warrior from the old Azure Dragon gang. I gave him the secret code phrase my master told me, and he answered correctly. Then he asked if I was the young gang leader that Boss Qin had mentioned. I had no idea what he was talking about. Master never said anything about me becoming a gang leader. Ghost 7, whose real name was Li Huai, explained that he was the gang's strategist. He used to be a strong cultivator, but his meridians were destroyed in the battle against the Zhang family. Now he was just an ordinary man. He told me about the old Azure Dragon gang. The 4 great protectors, 2 dead, 1 crippled, 1 fled overseas. The 8 guardians, 6 dead, 1 lost a leg, 1 in the hospital. All 10 hall masters died in battle. Basically, everyone from the old guard was gone. But Li Huai hadn't been idle these past 10 years. He'd carefully selected and trained 9 new people, all at the acquired stage. He also had a few hundred old low-ranking members he could gather, weaker, but still useful. I told him to bring them by in the afternoon so I could take a look. Then he handed me a phone full of information he'd collected on my master's orders, detailed files on the Yi family, Li family, Zhang family, and some limited info on the Lu family in the capital. I started going through everything. At the very end, I found a document titled, "The Truth About the Car Accident." My heart stopped. Li Huai said it wasn't about my accident. It was something else. A blurry image flashed in my mind. A memory from when I was 5 years old, one I could barely hold on to anymore. I opened the file and saw a photo. The figure in my fading memory slowly overlapped with the person in that picture. My hands started trembling. It was my mother's case. The official story said a drunk truck driver ran a red light and killed her. He got 20 years in prison. Everything in the file looked normal at first. But at the very bottom of the case file, someone had written a note suggesting it was a hired murder. That note had been crossed out, and the final ruling called it an accident. Li Huai explained what he'd found. While investigating the Yi family, he discovered that Yi Jinshan's wife, Li Yanhua, had sent 3 million yuan to someone 13 years ago. It turned out the money went to the truck driver's ex-wife, the mother of his child. When they tried to find the driver, he was already dead in prison. But there were clues. The officer who originally handled the case had suspected foul play. He wrote it in his report, but his opinion was quickly shut down, and he was transferred to the archives. Li Huai's people found that officer, and he confirmed the case had many suspicious points. The biggest one, the driver's friend said he was allergic to alcohol and never drank. But his own statement claimed he got drunk after fighting with his ex-wife. That made no sense either. His ex-wife was over 1,000 kilometers away with their child that day. Phone records showed he hadn't even called her around that time. The holes in the story were obvious, but the police closed the case anyway. Li Huai's conclusion was clear. Li Yanhua had my mother killed. The murder wasn't even cleverly done. It was just covered up by the Yi and Li families using their power. I stared at those crossed-out words for a long time. I couldn't calm down. When I heard everything Li Huai told me about my mother's death, my fists clenched so hard they cracked. My spiritual energy exploded out of me before I could stop it. Glasses and bottles went flying across the bar. The ones closest to me shattered into pieces. The whole place was a mess in seconds. Li Huai's eyes went wide. He realized I was a grandmaster. I could see him shaking. He knew I was only 18, almost 19, and being a grandmaster at this age was unheard of. I could tell what he was thinking. The Azure Dragon gang finally had someone who could take revenge. His eyes turned red. I figured he was remembering the people he lost 10 years ago in the war against the Zhang family, his wife and children. I didn't waste time. I told him coldly to gather every single person he could. Tonight, we were going after the Yi family and the Li family. The strongest fighter in the Yi family was Yi Haipeng, peak acquired stage, nothing I couldn't handle. I gave his people one job: don't let anyone escape. Not even a dog. After we finished with the Yi family, we'd move on to the Li family. Li Huai agreed, but asked if we should contact the Demon Slayer Guard first. The regular police don't get involved in martial world affairs, but the Demon Slayers do. He mentioned that Haicheng just got a new Demon Slayer commander last month, a low-level grandmaster. I pulled out my gold Demon Slayer medal and set it on the counter. I told him to take it to the Demon Slayer garrison and let them know what I was doing tonight. Li Huai's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Before today, only 8 people in the entire Blue Star Federation had a gold medal, 6 Demon Slayer commanders, and 2 peak grandmasters. My master Qin Tianlong had spent 10 years in prison trying to earn one and still hadn't gotten it. And here I was, 18 years old, holding one. Li Huai carefully put it away, nodding firmly. He understood what that medal meant. Then I asked him how much money the gang had. He caught on immediately. I wanted to launch a financial attack. He told me not to worry. When the Zhang family came for the Azure Dragon gang 10 years ago, they only lost territory, not money. He had already moved all the gang's assets before the attack. Over the past decade, he'd grown those assets tenfold. He said if we wanted a financial war, every family in Haicheng combined wouldn't be enough to fight him. I was impressed. The Azure Dragon gang used to be the #1 gang in the city, so their original wealth was already enormous. Multiply that by 10. Li Huai was a genius with money. No wonder he was the gang's strategist. I told him I wanted the Yi and Li families drowning in financial ruin by the end of today. First, crush their economy and let them taste despair. Then tonight, crush them for good. He smiled and said it would be easy. I headed for the door and told him to meet at 7 tonight with everyone. I also asked him to send me the information on the officer who handled my mother's case. Outside, I grabbed a taxi and told the driver to take me to Haicheng Sunshine Orphanage. He asked which one. Apparently a new one had opened about 10 months ago, not far from the old one. 10 months ago was right around when I got arrested. A bad feeling crossed my mind. I shook my head and hoped I was wrong. I told him to take me to the old one. The driver guessed I used to live there. He said all the kids had been moved to the new place, and the old orphanage was about to be demolished. See it while you can, he said. I didn't ask more questions. I needed to see things for myself before jumping to conclusions. On the way, I checked the file Li Huai sent me about the officer who closed my mother's case. His name was Lu Jin. 13 years ago, he was just a deputy squad leader at a local branch. After handling my mother's case, he climbed the ranks, promoted every 3 years on average, all the way up to deputy director of the city's main bureau. In a world where martial strength determines everything, a weak acquired stage cultivator like him reaching that position said everything. Someone powerful had been backing him the whole time. I memorized his name. After I dealt with the orphanage situation, I was going to pay Lu Jin a visit and find out exactly what happened back then. Half an hour later, the taxi stopped in front of the old orphanage. I looked at the rusty iron gate and memories of 13 years came flooding back. Just like the driver said, the place was empty. Even the white sign next to the gate had been taken down, but the small side door was still open. I pushed it gently. The rusty hinges screeched. "Who's there?" An old voice called out from the guard room. I smiled. "Grandpa Fu, it's me." An old man with a hunched back came out. Wang Fu, the orphanage's security guard. He put on his reading glasses, squinted at me, and his eyes went wide. "Wu Dao? You're out of prison?" I nodded. He grabbed my hand and patted it warmly, happy to see me. He said he'd heard from Mama Wang that I killed someone in a car accident and went to jail. He never believed it. He asked if I'd been cleared, and I told him yes. They found out I wasn't the one who hit that person. I asked where Mama Wang was. He sighed and said she and everyone else had moved to the new orphanage. This place was about to be torn down. When I asked why he didn't go with them, he told me he'd been working here since he was 30. He was 79 now. He couldn't bear to leave. Mama Wang told him the new place needed a fresh start, and that he should just retire there. But after 2 months of sitting around doing nothing, he came back. He said he'd stay here until they knocked it down. One last goodbye. I listened to him talk, knowing this old man didn't have much time left for talking. He eventually told me where the new orphanage was, and I walked over. It was completely different. Shiny new gate, new building, a younger guard in his 30s. I could see children playing in the yard. There were more kids than before, many I didn't recognize. The guard stopped me and asked what I wanted. I said I was here to see Mama Wang. He didn't know who that was. When I said her real name, Wang Cuihua, he said, "Oh, Director Wang," and told me to call her to come out. Director Wang. She used to make every new kid call her Mama. Now she was Director Wang. I told the guard I didn't have her number, so he called her for me. A few minutes later, a familiar figure walked out. My heart tightened. The Mama Wang I remembered always dressed simply. Now she was wearing fancy clothes and heavy makeup. In 13 years, I'd only seen her wear light makeup a few times, when meeting people who wanted to adopt. Never anything like this. She looked like a rich man's wife. When she saw me, her steps faltered for a second. Then she forced a smile and waved. Wu Dao. I noticed right away that her expression wasn't natural. I was already starting to guess what had happened here. She looked me over and asked how I got out so early. She'd heard I was sentenced to 15 years. That question hit me like cold water. The old Mama Wang would never have asked that. She would have hugged me and asked if I was okay in there. But this Wang Cuihua was questioning why I was out. That told me something. She probably knew about the Yi family framing me. She was clearly surprised and a little panicked to see me. She led me inside and started talking about how the orphanage had moved because of the demolition and how they'd found an investor to improve conditions for the children. I walked beside her and said nothing. In her office, she poured me water and asked, "So, Wu Dao, what brings you back?" That question killed my last hope. She used to say that any child from this orphanage could come back anytime. This was their home. Now she was asking me what business I had here, like I was a stranger. Everything had changed. Not just the building. The people too. I looked at her calmly and said, "I'm here for Ma Xianglian." She froze. She noticed I used Ma Xianglian's full name instead of calling her Annie Ma, like I always used to. I could see her tense up. She told me Ma Xianglian had the day off and suggested I come back tomorrow. I smiled and said, "Wang Cuihua, you don't seem happy at all that I'm out early." She stared at me in shock. I had called her by her full name. She must have realized. I already knew. Before she could react, there was a knock at the door. A familiar voice came from outside. "Sister Wang, I heard someone came to visit. Is it a new investor?" I looked at Wang Cuihua and said coldly, "I thought you said she had the day off." Wang Cuihua panicked and shouted, "Xianglian, run," but it was too late. Ma Xianglian had already pushed the door open. And even if she hadn't, I'm a condensation realm cultivator. If an ordinary person could outrun me, I might as well be dead. Ma Xianglian stood in the doorway, confused by the shouting. Then she saw me sitting there, and she froze. I smiled at her. "Ma Xianglian, long time no see." She spun around to run, but she couldn't move. Not even a finger. I held her in place with my power and pulled her into the room. The door slammed shut behind her on its own. I looked at both of them and said coldly, "I think it's time we had a nice little chat." Ma Xianglian was shaking. She asked what I wanted to talk about. I told her she already knew. She shook her head, and Wang Cuihua tried to play innocent, saying there must be some misunderstanding. I looked at Wang Cuihua coldly. I told her I knew she was involved in framing me. I remembered what she said to me back then, that if I really did something wrong, I should just admit it and hope for a lighter sentence. At the time, I thought she was trying to encourage me. Now I realized she was planting the idea in my head to plead guilty. She denied everything. I told her that was fine. I had 2 hours, and if I didn't hear what I wanted to hear, things would get ugly. She tried to run. I pinned her down with my spiritual pressure. She couldn't breathe. Her face turned purple. She finally broke. "I'll talk," she gasped. I released her and let her catch her breath. She pointed at Ma Xianglian and said it was all her idea. She claimed Ma Xianglian told her the Yi family offered a deal. If they helped frame me to take the fall for Yi Mingyuan, they'd get a huge payment and investment. For a new orphanage. Ma Xianglian exploded. She screamed that Wang Cuihua was a shameless liar, that it was Wang Cuihua who came to her and asked her to give false testimony. She said the Yi family paid 10 million yuan total. Wang Cuihua took 3 million. She only got 2 million. The demolition money from the old orphanage all went to someone else. Wang Cuihua became director while she was still doing odd jobs. And now Wang Cuihua wanted her to take the blame? I listened to them tear into each other, but something Ma Xianglian said caught my attention. She said, "You all split the money." That meant there was a third person. I asked her directly, "Who got the other 5 million?" She realized she'd said too much and tried to backtrack. I reminded her what just happened to Wang Cuihua, and she started talking fast. It was Wang Fu, Grandpa Fu, the old security guard. He was the one who brought the Yi family's people into the orphanage. He overheard their conversation with Wang Cuihua and then pushed both women to go along with the plan. He convinced them it was worth it, they'd get rich, and the children would have better lives. Wang Cuihua added that Wang Fu took all the demolition money too. He used what he knew about them as leverage, saying he was old and needed money for retirement. If they didn't pay up, he'd turn himself in and drag them all down together. That's why he was still at the old orphanage. He was waiting for the demolition to go through so he could collect the rest of the payment. I was stunned. That kind old man who held my hand and patted it just an hour ago. He was one of the people who sold me out. He didn't flinch when he saw me. He acted like he barely knew what happened to me. His performance was flawless. The old fox had nerves of steel. I asked if it was just the three of them behind the whole thing. Ma Xianglian wouldn't answer, so I turned to Wang Zuohua. After nearly suffocating, she wasn't going to hold anything back. She confirmed it, just the three of them. Then she tried to justify herself. She said everything they did was for the children. Yi Zhinshan promised them 10 million, a new orphanage, and investors. She said she made a mistake in a moment of weakness. She even said Yi Zhinshan promised to pull strings and get me a shorter sentence, and she never expected I'd get 15 years. I thought about the 13 years she raised me. She really had been good to me and to all the children. But money changed her. At the old orphanage, with nothing but government money, she cared for every child personally. Now at the new place, with investors and more kids, she didn't bother anymore. Walking through earlier, I saw hired caretakers doing everything. Not a single child called out to her when she passed. Back at the old place, every kid would shout, "Mama," the moment they saw her. I looked at her and said she kept claiming it was all for the children. But I called her Mama for 13 years. Wasn't I one of those children too? I told her I wouldn't kill her, out of respect for the 13 years she raised me. But I would take one finger, to remind her never to sell people out for money again. These kids had nobody else. Some were abandoned, some lost their parents. The orphanage was all they had. I told her to stop treating them as tools for making money, and she didn't need to worry about funding anymore. I'd have money sent to a supervised account for the children's care and education. A blade of white energy formed from my power and cut off the little finger on her left hand. It dropped to the floor. She trembled from the pain but didn't scream. She just gripped the wound with her other hand and cried silently. Whether from pain or regret, I couldn't tell. Then I turned to Ma Xianglian. She wasn't the mastermind, but her false testimony put me in prison. I told her I wouldn't kill her either, but I was going to cut out her tongue so she could never lie about anyone again. She'd remember for the rest of her life what happens when you frame someone. She begged and shook her head desperately. I didn't listen. I used my spiritual power to force her mouth open and cut her tongue with a blade of energy. Her screams filled the office. She rolled on the floor, clutching her mouth, trying to make the pain stop. But that kind of pain doesn't stop. I stood up, took one last look at Wang Zuohua, stepped over Ma Xianglian, and walked out. On my way through the yard, I saw the children playing. I called Li Huai and told him to send money to the orphanage and to track down Wang Fu. I knew that old fox wouldn't be sitting around at the old orphanage waiting for me. 10 minutes after I left the orphanage, Li Huai sent me Wang Fu's location. Just as I expected, the old man bolted from the old orphanage right after I left. His phone tracked to Jingyuan Villa District. That bastard had been living in a luxury villa this whole time. Not bad for a guy who spent decades pretending to be a humble security guard. I flew straight there. When I arrived, Wang Fu was lounging on a leather sofa, swirling a glass of red wine and muttering to himself. I heard every word from the second floor. He was wondering how I got out so fast, hoping the two women didn't give him up, reassuring himself that even if they did, he was a millionaire now and I was just some kid who couldn't touch him. But his right eyelid kept twitching, and he was planning to leave Haicheng as soon as the demolition money came through. I spoke up from the second floor. "So you do know that you're out in the open and I'm in the shadows." He froze mid-sip. He looked up at me, eyes shrinking to pinpoints. "How did you get in here?" I walked down the stairs slowly. "I just walked in." He grabbed the landline phone and hit the emergency button for the villa's security. Quick hands for an old man who could barely walk an hour ago. I flicked a burst of energy at the phone and it exploded into pieces. He stared at me. Innate realm? He didn't practice martial arts, but he watched enough news to know that projecting energy outside the body meant innate realm at least. I could see his mind racing. If I was this strong before prison, the Yi family would never have dared touch me. And if I reached this level inside prison in less than a year, that was terrifying. He tried playing innocent first. He smiled and said there must be a misunderstanding, that Wang Zuohua and Ma Xianglian were liars, and that the whole framing had nothing to do with him. I smiled back and asked how he knew I was here about the framing when I hadn't even mentioned it. He went pale. He'd just confessed with his own mouth. He started backing away, warning me that killing was illegal and that his house was full of security cameras. I glanced up at the cameras, thanked him for the reminder, and shot them all to dust with my energy. Now nobody will know it was me, I said. He slapped himself in frustration, then dropped to his knees. He started begging, calling himself an animal, saying he was blinded by greed, slapping his own face over and over. I sat down on the sofa across from him and watched. After a while he stopped and looked up. I asked why he quit. If he kept going and made me happy enough, maybe I'd spare him. His eyes narrowed. He got up off the floor. The groveling act was over. He tried threatening me next, claiming he was connected to the Wang family in the capital, the family of Grandmaster Wang Pingqing. I told him I'd never heard of Wang Pingqing, and even if the connection were real, a 79-year-old man with zero cultivation who got kicked out of his family and ended up as a security guard 3,000 kilometers from the capital wasn't exactly intimidating. He'd probably just seen the name on the news and decided to use it. His face turned red. I was right. Then he tried a different angle. He said he had a priceless treasure that could help someone break through beyond the Grandmaster level. I laughed in his face. I asked how a man with no martial ability whatsoever would know what could help someone reach beyond Grandmaster. I told him to stop making things up, but he insisted. He said he was a 12th-generation descendant of Wang Zongyue, who was a disciple of Zhang Sanfeng. The treasure had been passed down through his family from Zhang Sanfeng himself, though by his grandfather's generation, nobody knew how to use it anymore. That got my attention. I didn't know who Wang Zongyue was, but I'd heard my master Qin Tianlong mention Zhang Sanfeng several times, the last land immortal of the Dragon Kingdom. If this treasure really came from Zhang Sanfeng, it might actually be something real. I kept my face unimpressed and told him that if even his grandfather couldn't use it, why would I want it? He asked if I'd spare his life in exchange for the treasure. I shrugged and said it depended on whether what he brought out was actually worth his life. If he handed me a rock and called it a treasure, he'd regret it. He thought for a long time, then walked over to a shrine against the wall. He reached into a hidden compartment underneath it and pulled out a ring. I scanned it with my spiritual power and immediately noticed something strange. My spiritual sense couldn't detect the ring at all. My eyes could clearly see a black ring in his hand, but when I swept my power over it, there was nothing there, as if it didn't exist. Wang Fu walked toward me with the ring in his open palm. He asked if I'd spare him in exchange for it. I reached out to take it. The instant my hand got close, his face twisted into something vicious. I sensed danger and tried to pull back while slamming him with my spiritual pressure. But I was a split second too late. My hand was only 2 or 3 centimeters from the ring, and he jerked his hand upward to meet mine. He hit the ground under my spiritual force. At the same time, I felt a sharp sting in my palm. It turned black almost instantly. Poison. A purple-black stain spread rapidly across my hand. I poured my innate true liquid from my core into my palm, desperately blocking the poison from reaching my shoulder. When the liquid touched the toxin, my hand made a hissing sound. I was shocked. This poison could actually corrode innate true liquid. Not just innate true energy, but the liquid itself, which was far more powerful. If I were only at the innate realm, I'd have no chance of stopping it. Wang Fu, pinned to the floor, realized I wasn't using energy to hold him down. It was pure spiritual force. His eyes went wide. You're not innate realm. You're a grandmaster. He couldn't believe it. An 18-year-old grandmaster was unheard of. Then he started laughing. He pulled out a tiny black needle hidden in a gap in the ring, thin as a hair, short as a fingernail. He said the needle was an heirloom coated in poison extracted from something called heart-eroding grass. He boasted that even a grandmaster couldn't survive it. He gave me a choice, submit to him, and he'd give me the antidote regularly. I stared at him calmly. Inside my body, my innate true liquid was slowly pushing the poison out. It was working just slowly. The poison was powerful enough to eat away at my liquid, but the liquid was eating the poison right back. The dark patch on my palm had already stopped spreading and was shrinking. A few more seconds, and it would be gone completely. I told him I'd originally planned to just cripple his legs, not kill him. But since he wanted to die, that was his choice. He warned me not to be reckless, saying even a grandmaster couldn't survive the poison and asking if I really wanted mutual destruction. I laughed. I told him he wasn't worthy of mutual destruction. Then I asked, if a grandmaster can't survive it, what about someone above grandmaster? The poison shot out of my palm. A single drop of pitch-black blood floated in the air above my hand, held there by my spiritual power. Wang Fu's eyes nearly fell out of his head. Condensation realm, he started shaking his head wildly, screaming that it was impossible. I used my spiritual force to pry his mouth open and sent the poisoned blood straight in. I survived your heart-eroding grass, I said. Let's see if you can. I released my hold on him. He gagged and clawed at his mouth, drool pouring out, but it was already too late. The toxin spread through him instantly. His mouth turned black, then his face, then his neck, his body, his limbs. In less than 10 seconds, Wang Fu was a stiff, blackened corpse reeking of decay. I pinched my nose and pulled the ring from his hand with my spiritual power. I didn't leave right away. I sat on the sofa and studied the ring. Wang Fu had possessed a poison capable of killing a grandmaster, which meant his ancestors were at least grandmaster level. And right before he died, when I only said I was above grandmaster, he immediately said, condensation realm, a term that, according to my master, even current grandmasters didn't know. That meant his ancestor Wang Zongyue really might have been a condensation realm cultivator. So this ring could actually be something special. It looked simple, carved from a single piece of cold, smooth stone with no setting. But when I used my spiritual power to magnify the surface, I found incredibly tiny patterns covering it, forming what looked like a maze. The starting point was at the center of the ring's face, and after searching for a while, I found the exit at the upper right corner. The moment my spiritual power touched the exit point, I felt a small chunk of it get pulled away. I pushed more in. A few seconds later, my spiritual power was yanked hard, and a pure white space appeared in my mind. It was small, about the size of a master bedroom. In the middle sat a table with a book and several jade bottles glowing faintly green. On the left side stood a weapon rack holding a sword, a saber, and a long spear. I stood there stunned. A storage ring. I'd seen these in games and novels. I always thought they were made up. Turns out they're real. I used my spiritual power to pull the book and jade bottles out of the storage ring. They appeared in my hands. The book's cover read, Taiji Heart Sutra. I opened it and found that the first page wasn't techniques. It was Wang Zongyue's personal account. He wrote that he fell into a cave as a young man and found a pool of stalactite liquid. He reached the innate realm at 21, became a grandmaster at 34, and was accepted as a disciple under ancestor Zhang Sanfeng. Zhang Sanfeng taught him the Taiji Heart Sutra, and he cultivated all the way to the condensation realm. But his talent was limited. He hit a wall at peak condensation and couldn't advance further. He tried to force a breakthrough, failed, lost all his cultivation, and was left with little time to live. He left the technique behind for his descendants with a warning, never try to force a breakthrough. He also noted that the jade bottles contained his leftover stalactite liquid, 1 drop at a time, once a month, no more. My hands were shaking. Wang Zongyue's natural talent was actually pretty poor. Without the stalactite liquid, he probably never would have made it to the condensation realm. Out of what must have been over 100 bottles worth, only 5 remained. I didn't care much about the liquid since my cultivation relied on my system, not raw talent. But the Taiji Heart Sutra was a real treasure. According to Wang Zongyue, it could take someone all the way to the martial golden core realm, the stage above condensation, where liquid energy condenses into a core. My own technique, the myriad fusion art, had already confirmed that was the next step. This was almost certainly a technique Zhang Sanfeng created himself. I flipped through every page and let the system record it. Initial proficiency, 100,000. It was the real deal, a path to golden core. My myriad fusion art could already reach golden core, but my 3 masters couldn't cultivate it. The Taiji Heart Sutra might be exactly what they needed. And the 5 bottles of stalactite liquid could probably push my 2nd and 3rd masters to the innate realm and help my 1st master attempt a grandmaster breakthrough. I also needed to fuse the Taiji Heart Sutra into my myriad fusion art to boost its efficiency. I was curious too, was the stage after golden core what people called land immortal? I sat on the sofa and started cultivating, pushing the technique with my system's motivation method. After half an hour, the Taiji Heart Sutra completed 100 cycles and reached the entry level. Cultivation efficiency topped out at 640 proficiency points per minute. Beyond that, the system said the technique was incomplete. I already expected this. Every technique had an efficiency cap based on its tier. Basic ones that reached Grandmaster capped at 160. Better ones like the Free Spirit Art that reached Condensation capped at 320. Golden Core level techniques like the Taiji Heart Sutra capped at 640. It would take about 3 months to fully master. My Myriad Fusion Art was the exception. Every new technique I fused into it doubled the combined efficiency of all previous ones. So as long as I kept finding new techniques, there was no limit. The problem was that I'd already fused most of the good techniques available on Blue Star. Where would I find more? Then I remembered what my second master told me about Li Changhua and his 10,000 Dharma sect, an organization that collected martial techniques from everywhere. After I finished things in Haicheng, maybe I should pay them a visit. I could settle the grudge with the Free Spirit sect and grab some new techniques at the same time. I put the book and bottles back into the storage ring and pulled out the 3 weapons: a sword, a saber, and a long spear. They weren't the dark color of meteoric iron. They were bright silver, like refined steel. But the moment I gripped them, I knew they were far superior to my first master's family heirloom spear. A wave of cold shot up from my palm into my arm. If my body weren't as strong as it was, the cold alone could have caused frostbite. I took the spear and struck with triple-layered penetrating force, channeling innate true liquid into the tip. The meteoric iron spear would have cracked under that. This one didn't even tremble. Beautiful spear, I muttered. I found 2 characters engraved on the butt of the spear: dark iron. The sword and saber had the same marking. Weapons forged from dark iron. Ancient craftsmanship on another level. I'd returned the meteoric iron spear to Qin Tianlong when I left prison since it was his family heirloom and I was worried about breaking it. Plus, carrying a 5-meter spear around the city wasn't practical. But now with the storage ring, I could carry weapons anywhere. I put all 3 back inside. I glanced at Wang Fu's blackened corpse on the floor, turned around, and left. After leaving the Villa District, I headed straight to the Haicheng Security Bureau headquarters. Before going after the Yi family tonight, I needed to find out the full truth about my mother's death. I walked right into the deputy director's office. Lu Jin was sitting at his desk rubbing his forehead, clearly stressed about his career. He wanted to transfer to the Demon Slayer Guard but couldn't get in without starting from the bottom, and he wasn't willing to give up his current rank. He looked up and asked who I was. I smiled and introduced myself. Yi Wudao, son of Yi Jinshan and Wu Wan. I told him I was here to discuss the details of my mother's car accident case. He froze. He didn't remember my name, but he remembered the case. That case was the reason he'd gotten close to the Yi family and climbed to where he was now. He reached for his desk phone to call someone to throw me out. I flicked a shot of energy at the phone and blew it apart. He stared at me, holding the dead receiver, and stammered. Innate realm? He looked at me, younger than his own son, and started to shake. I closed the door quietly and sat down across from Lu Jin. I asked if we could talk now. He licked his lips and swallowed hard, then leaned back in his chair, trying to look calm. He told me to go ahead and ask. He figured I wouldn't dare kill him here. This was the city's main security bureau, with cameras on every floor. He thought that would protect him. I asked him straight. Was my mother's car accident man-made or an accident? He didn't hesitate. Man-made. He didn't even try to hide it. He figured I already knew some of the truth, so there was no point lying. He said he was just a small deputy squad leader back then, doing what he was told from above. If he hadn't handled the case, someone else would have. I asked if it was Yi Jinshan. He shook his head. He said based on what they found, the truck driver was paid to kill my mother, but they never investigated who paid for it. He said the Yi and Li families pulled a lot of strings together, and plenty of people were willing to do their bidding. People above him gave the green lights during the investigation. He just took the Yi family's money and followed their instructions. I told him he seemed pretty unbothered about covering up a murder. He shrugged and said the Yi family ranked 7th in Haicheng, the Li family 4th. 2 families like that working together could easily bury the truth about one ordinary person's death. Then he said something that made my blood boil. He told me my mother brought it on herself. I asked what he meant by that. He explained that my mother had gone to Yi Jinshan asking for child support because she was broke. Li Yanhua, Yi Jinshan's wife, found out about it. A wife discovering her husband had a child with another woman. Of course she'd be furious. Lu Jin believed it was Li Yanhua who ordered the hit. He said my mother wasn't wrong exactly, but she should never have gone to Yi Jinshan. She was just a former mate of the Yi family. She should have known better than to get tangled up with people like them. I laughed, not because it was funny. I told him my mother raised me completely alone after Yi Jinshan kicked us out. Asking for child support was her right. If Yi Jinshan knew there was no future with her, he shouldn't have let her give birth to me in the first place. Lu Jin paused. He said he thought I already knew the full truth. I didn't. So he told me. Yi Jinshan got drunk and forced himself on my mother. Afterward, he told her to get rid of the pregnancy. She refused. She said the baby was part of her own body. So Yi Jinshan threw her out of the Yi household before I was even born. She left and gave birth to me on her own. Lu Jin said he learned this from Yi Jinshan himself during a drinking session years later. Knowing Yi Jinshan, what he said drunk was probably the truth. I went completely still. If my mother hadn't insisted on keeping me, I wouldn't exist. I saw her in my mind, thin, fragile, but so strong. My memories from those first 5 years were short and scattered, but I could clearly remember her smile. Mom, why were you so stubborn? I thought. If you hadn't had me, maybe you'd still be alive. My eyes burned. I remembered the little pieces. No matter how hard life was, she always brought me a lollipop after her night shift. That sweetness. I still remembered it. I stood up and thanked Lu Jin for telling me the truth. He stood too, smiling, saying it was nothing. Then I told him the rest. He wasn't the one who killed my mother, but he covered up the truth of her case. So I was going to take one of his arms as a warning. I wanted him to remember that some things should never be done, especially by a man wearing a law enforcement uniform. His face went white. He shouted that this was the Security Bureau headquarters and that even a grandmaster couldn't get away with attacking a deputy director here. He lunged for the gun in his desk drawer. The moment his hand touched the drawer, I locked him in place with my spiritual force. With his low-level acquired cultivation, he couldn't move at all. He rolled his eyes upward, trying to see my face, and stammered that I wasn't innate realm. I was a grandmaster. He wondered if I was at the greater achievement or peak level, since it would take at least that much spiritual force to freeze someone at his level. I told him it was none of his business. He just needed to keep his mouth shut, or next time it wouldn't be just a hand. A small blade of white energy formed and came down on his left arm. His entire forearm dropped onto the desk. He clenched his teeth and didn't make a sound. He told himself this was karma. He'd spent years burning incense and praying, afraid that everything he'd done would come back to haunt him. Now it had. I walked out of his office. Behind me, he stared at the empty doorway and muttered to himself, "The skies over Haicheng are about to change." After learning the full truth about my mother, I flew toward the cemetery. On the way, I checked my phone. Li Huai had messaged me. The financial war was already working. I searched for Haicheng financial news. The headlines were exactly what I wanted to see. The Yi Group stock was being hammered by unknown funds, already down 10%. Shareholders were panicking and dumping their shares, which our side was scooping up. The Li Group was getting hit the same way. Analysts were guessing it might be a rival family's attack. The Yi and Li families were discussing joining forces to fight back, but once the trading halt lifted in an hour, they'd get crushed again. Li Huai controlled funds 10 to dozens of times larger than both families combined. Beating them was just a matter of time. Unless some other family stepped in to help them, both companies would change hands by tonight. I glanced toward where the Yi family estate was and smiled. Don't rush. The show's just getting started. I landed at the public cemetery. I first found out my mother was buried here when I was 10. Every year after that, I came to visit her grave. This year I missed her anniversary because I was in prison. I wiped the dust off her headstone and talked to her quietly. I told her I'd avenge her tonight. I told her about the 3 masters I found in prison and how I learned martial arts. I asked if she was watching over me from up there. I told her I missed her. I knelt there for half an hour before I could make myself leave. Back at the Dragon's Roar Tavern on Flower Street, 9 people were waiting alongside Li Huai. All in their 30s, men and women, all at the acquired realm. Reaching that level by 30 meant decent talent. I kept it short. I told them Li Huai had already explained tonight's mission. After tonight, the Azure Dragon Gang would officially exist again, and everyone who survived would be founding members. Li Huai knew them best, so he'd handle position assignments. I had only one rule: no betrayal. Betray me and you die. As for the rewards of following me, they'd find out soon enough. I told them to rest up. We moved at 7. They answered together, yes. I turned to Li Huai and asked about the financial war. He pulled out a tablet and showed me the numbers. Both family stocks had dropped 20% and hit the trading halt again. We'd already bought 13% of Li Group shares and 21% of Yi Group shares. Both families had diluted their own holdings through years of fundraising, so they didn't actually hold that much stock themselves. Li Huai estimated we'd control over 50% of both companies by tonight. Full takeover. I nodded and pulled a jade bottle from my storage ring. I set it in front of him and told him to try 1 drop of the stalactite liquid to see if it could repair his broken meridians. As the gang's strategist controlling all our money, he'd become a target once we went public. Having some cultivation would help. I didn't want him to be our weak point. He opened the bottle, and a strange fragrance hit him immediately. He said it made his whole body feel refreshed. He trusted me, so he didn't hesitate. He poured one drop into a small glass and swallowed it. The liquid didn't slide down to his stomach. It dissolved right in his mouth and turned into streams of energy that flowed into his meridians. I told him to hold still while I scanned his body with my spiritual power. What I sensed was fascinating. The energy didn't go to the dantian like normal spiritual energy. It only moved through the meridians. Li Huai's meridians were shattered, so the energy moved slowly, but wherever it passed, the broken meridians softened and started extending, reconnecting. The stalactite liquid really could repair meridians. I'd only given it to him as an experiment. Wang Zongyue's notes said it strengthened meridians to speed up cultivation. I figured if it could strengthen them, maybe it could fix them too. And it worked. Half an hour later, Li Huai opened his eyes. He looked at me with deep gratitude and said, "Thank you, gang leader." He told me that single drop had repaired about a third of his broken meridians. 2 more drops, and they'd be fully reconnected. But the repaired sections were still fragile. He'd need 2 more drops after that to strengthen them before he could actually cultivate again. For more drops total, for more months. But he was overjoyed. Without this, he might never have cultivated again in his life. He bowed and swore he'd do anything I asked, no matter how dangerous. I waved it off and told him to rest. Tonight, he was coming with me to the Yi family estate. Tonight isn't just my revenge, I said. It's the night the Azure Dragon Gang announces its return. He nodded firmly. Yes. By 7 in the evening, the Yi family was already in chaos. Their stock had dropped 60% in a single day. Their assets had shrunk massively, and after an internal count, they only held 35% of their own company's shares. They tried buying back shares in the afternoon, but got outbid at every turn. The reality was brutal. Yi Group had essentially already changed hands. Old man Yi Haipeng was furious. He threw an expensive antique cup at his son Yi Jinshan's feet and called him useless. They still had no idea who was behind the attack. Then their butler announced visitors. Someone claiming to be the actual controller of the Yi Group had come to discuss buying their remaining shares. Yi Haipeng told the butler to let them in. Li Huai walked in with the 9 fighters behind him. It took Yi Haipeng a moment, but he finally recognized him. Azure Dragon Ghost 7, the legendary strategist once known as the smartest man in Haicheng. He hadn't recognized Li Huai at first because the man had aged so much in 11 years. Li Huai got straight to the point. He was here about the 35%. Yi Haipeng protested that his family had nothing to do with the Azure Dragon Gang's destruction. That was the Zhang family's doing. He demanded to know if this was Qin Tianlong's order or if Li Huai was acting alone. He even sneered about that bastard child only having a small conflict with his grandson. Li Huai's eyes turned cold. He told Yi Haipeng this wasn't Qin Tianlong's order. It was the new gang leaders. And he warned the old man to watch his mouth, unless he wanted blood all over his villa tonight. Yi Haipeng laughed and called Li Huai a cripple. He waved in a dozen of his armed thugs, men with swords, a mix of body tempering and acquired level fighters. He challenged Li Huai to bring out this so-called new leader. Li Huai glanced up at the second floor and asked, "Gang leader, do you want to come down, or should we handle this?" Yi Haipeng followed his gaze upward. He heard a young voice say, "I'll handle it myself. I have some questions for Yi Jinshan." When I stepped out at the top of the stairs, Yi Haipeng's face went white. "It's you." Yi Jinshan stared at me in disbelief. "Yi Wudao? You're supposed to be in prison. Did you escape?" I smiled and walked down slowly. "Do you really think I'd need to escape?" Yi Jinshan's face tightened. He asked if I was behind today's attack on the company. I nodded and told him yes, and that I was going to make him watch the Yi family fall apart with his own eyes. Then I'd send him, his father, and his precious son to reunite in the afterlife. He shouted at me, calling me disrespectful, reminding me he was my biological father. He warned me not to think I could do whatever I wanted just because I had the Azure Dragon Gang behind me. He said the gang's real enemy was the Zhang family, and that I'd get myself killed. I laughed. Biological father? My biological father killed my biological mother, and then threw me in prison. What a joke. I told him the Zhang family was next on my list. One at a time. None of them would escape. He frowned and asked what I meant about him killing my mother. I corrected myself. He was just the accomplice. The real killer was his wife, Li Yanhua. He tried lying. He said the car accident was just that, an accident. He even offered to let me return to the Yi family and said he'd treat me like his other son, Yi Mingyuan. I rolled my eyes. 18 years he had to bring me home, and now that he saw I had the Azure Dragon gang, suddenly he wanted me back, so he could use me to control the gang's power. I mentioned Lu Jin's name, the deputy squad leader who handled the case for him. His face changed. He realized I knew everything. He asked coldly if I'd come here with the gang just for revenge. I laughed hard. If I'm not here for revenge, what? You think I came to join the family reunion? Yi Haiping realized there was no avoiding a fight tonight. He told Yi Jinshan to stop wasting words and just kill us all. He thought they had the advantage in numbers. He called on his old butler, a man called Old Ma, to join the battle. I stood at the top of the stairs and didn't move. I wanted to see if Li Huai's 9 fighters could handle the Yi family without my help. If they couldn't even do this much, the Azure Dragon gang wouldn't survive after I left Haicheng for the capital. These 9 people needed to prove they were worth something. Li Huai gave the order. His people drew their weapons and moved. 2 of them, the bald guy and another man, took on Old Ma. A middle-aged woman and a crew-cut guy went after Yi Haiping. The remaining 5 charged the dozen or so Yi family thugs near the entrance. The place erupted. Metal clashing, battle cries, screams. Within a minute, 7 or 8 of the Yi family thugs were down. I watched from the staircase and nodded. Li Huai's people were good, real fighters with actual combat experience, not just cultivators who only knew how to train. They coordinated well, clearly used to working together. Yi Haiping and Old Ma were both peak acquired, but under pressure from 2 greater achievement fighters each, they were slowly losing ground. The Yi family's body-tempering thugs were basically useless. No coordination, no real offense or defense. They crumbled on contact. Yi Haiping saw things going badly and shouted at Old Ma to forget his opponents and go kill me instead. Cut off the head and the body dies. Old Ma broke away from the bald fighter and rushed toward me at the stairs. The bald guy moved to intercept, but I raised my hand slightly. He saw the signal and stopped. Old Ma noticed and tried to retreat, but it was too late. I shot a thread of white energy straight into the back of his skull. His eyes went wide with terror. He hit the ground and didn't get up. That's enough, I said quietly. All 9 fighters immediately returned to Li Huai's side and stood in formation. Yi Haiping stared at me with his mouth hanging open. It took him a while to speak. Your innate realm. He'd seen it clearly. Energy leaving my body, the unmistakable sign of the innate stage. Yi Jinshan shouted that it was impossible. I was an ordinary person when I went to prison less than a year ago. How could I be innate already? Li Huai's 9 fighters were staring at me too, shocked. Li Huai stayed calm. He already knew I was far beyond innate. The bald fighter leaned over and whispered to Li Huai, asking if I really reached innate in under a year. Li Huai told him quietly that what they were seeing was just the tip of the iceberg. That shut everyone up. They were trying to figure out what tip of the iceberg meant. Some of them were probably guessing Grandmaster, then shaking the thought away because it seemed too insane. They'd come tonight prepared to risk their lives. The Yi family was manageable, but the Li family had an innate level fighter in Li Yaozhu. Knowing I was at least innate too took a lot of weight off their shoulders. I looked at Yi Jinshan and said, "Nothing in this world is impossible. You managed to send your own son to prison. After that, what can't happen?" I told him I could have just let Li Huai's people wipe out the Yi family without me even showing up. But I came anyway. I came for one reason. I wanted to ask you face to face. In all these years, have you ever felt even a shred of guilt toward my mother? Yi Jinshan's heart was pounding. He knew his answer might decide whether he lived or died. He put on a performance, said he'd always wanted to bring me and my mother home, but had no power in the family. He blamed everything on his wife, Li Yanhua. He said she controlled everything, that she was the one who had my mother killed, that he only found out later. He claimed he felt guilty every single day. Then he started slapping himself and fake crying. I sat on the sofa and watched the whole act. When he finished, I leaned forward and smiled. "You've been crying all this time, and there's not a single tear. You need to work on your acting." He wiped his dry eyes with his sleeve and kept insisting everything he said was true. He begged me to come back to the Yi family and promised to make it up to me. I told him I didn't need anything from him. With my strength, I could live well anywhere. I didn't even care if what he said was true or not, because I could tell the only thing on his mind was getting me to rejoin the family so my power could boost the Yi family's standing. I stood up and told him one last thing. "Next time you lie, don't let your heart beat so fast. It gives you away." I shot a thread of innate energy from my fingertips straight through his chest. He coughed up blood and stared at the hole in disbelief. "You? You dare kill your own father. I looked down at him as he fell. Father? You don't deserve that title. I only came here tonight to hear you confess, not to me, but to my mother's spirit. Yi Haipeng screamed his son's name. For all his contempt toward Yi Zhinshan, it was still his son dying in front of him. His eyes turned red. He clenched his fists, then slowly let go. He knew he couldn't beat me. If he died too, the Yi family would be completely finished. I told him not to worry. I'd send him to join his son soon enough. I raised my hand. Then a gunshot rang out behind me. I blocked the bullet with a barrier of energy. A rough voice shouted for me to surrender. Someone had called the Demon Slayer guard. I turned around. A square-jawed man in a Demon Slayer uniform marched in with a squad of soldiers behind him. I looked at Li Huai, confused. He was just as stunned. He'd gone to the Demon Slayer headquarters that afternoon with my gold medal. The 1st Brigade captain had personally verified it, promised that no one would interfere tonight, and respectfully escorted him out. Yet here they were. The squad leader introduced himself as Wu Qiuhao, leader of the 4th Squad under the 1st Brigade. He said they received a distress call from the Yi family and found criminals here. He walked up to me, pointed his body camera at my face, and ordered me to put my hands on my head and squat down. He said he saw me block the bullet with energy, so he knew I was innate realm, but that didn't give me the right to kill. I wasn't interested in arguing with him. I turned to Li Huai and said, "Call the Haicheng Demon Slayer commander. Tell him to get over here. If he's not standing in front of me in 3 minutes, he can find a new job." Li Huai hesitated for a second. Technically, as a gold Demon Slayer, I had authority to mobilize Demon Slayer forces in certain situations. But ordering a city commander, a grandmaster, to get over here was a bold move. Still, he didn't question me. He pulled out his phone and called the 1st Brigade captain, a man named Zhao Jinyu. Li Huai's tone was sharp. He told Zhao Jinyu that Mr. Yi wanted him here immediately and to bring the Demon Slayer commander along. Zhao Jinyu could hear something was wrong. He asked carefully what had happened. He'd been respectful to Li Huai all along because he knew Li Huai represented the owner of gold medal number 009, someone surnamed Yi. He didn't even know my full name because his clearance wasn't high enough. But hearing that I also wanted the city commander brought along, he knew the situation was serious. Li Huai sighed and reminded Zhao Jinyu on the phone about what he'd said that afternoon, that I'd be handling things at the Yi and Li family estates tonight. Now one of his own squad leaders had shown up trying to arrest me. Zhao Jinyu nearly lost his mind. He screamed at Wu Qiuhao through the speaker, calling him an idiot and telling him to get his men out of there immediately. Wu Qiuhao went pale. He finally remembered that his captain had told him to stay away from the Yi and Li estates tonight. He'd ignored it because he saw an opportunity to squeeze some money out of the situation. Now he realized he'd made a terrible mistake. I spoke into the phone directly. I told Zhao Jinyu my surname was Yi and that he should know who I was. I ordered him to come to the Yi estate immediately and bring the current Haicheng Demon Slayer commander with him. 3 minutes. If I didn't see them both, there would be consequences. After a pause, Zhao Jinyu quietly answered, "Yes." The phone went dead. Wu Qiuhao handed the phone back to Li Huai looking like he wanted to cry, then stood off to the side without another word. Yi Haipeng watched all of this in shock. He couldn't understand how I could speak to someone like Zhao Jinyu, an innate realm expert and a powerful brigade captain, in that tone, and get nothing but obedience in return. Everyone in Haicheng treated Zhao Jinyu with respect, even the Zhang family. The old man was starting to realize the Yi family was truly finished. Li Huai's 9 fighters were stunned too. They were piecing things together. My authority couldn't come from family connection since I was just a disowned, illegitimate son. It had to come from my own power. They kept thinking about what Li Huai said earlier, that what they'd seen was only the tip of the iceberg. The only explanation that made sense was one they could barely believe. I told the 9 to stop standing around and go find Li Yanhua and Yi Mingyuan. The bald fighter stepped forward and said they already had intel. Yi Mingyuan was at the Martial Arts Academy, and Li Yanhua was at the Li family estate. I turned to Yi Haipeng and gave him 2 choices. Kill himself, or I'd do it for him. My plan for the Yi and Li families was simple and decided long before I left prison. Everyone responsible had to go. Wang Zuohua and Ma Xianglian only helped frame me for prison, and they'd raised me for years, so I crippled them instead of killing them. Wang Fu killed himself with his own poison. Lu Jin just covered up the case, so he lost a hand. But the Yi and Li families were different. Li Yanhua murdered my mother. Yi Zhinshan was the root of everything. If he hadn't assaulted my mother, none of this would have happened. They had to die, and I believed in cutting problems at the root. If I killed the key people and left the rest alive, they'd come after me eventually. The Yi and Li families had enough resources to get dangerous weapons that could hurt even someone at my level. Better to end it all at once. Yi Haipeng tried guilt-tripping me, called me disrespectful, said I carried Yi family blood, accused me of destroying my own ancestors. I laughed. I told him I'd never eaten a single grain of their rice. I had no father. He died a long time ago. The only proof of any connection was now a corpse on the floor. I started counting down. 3, 2. Right before I said 1, I felt 2 people flying toward us at high speed. The Demon Slayer commander and Zhao Jinyu were arriving. I didn't wait for them. I said 1, told Yi Haipeng he'd lost his chance, and put a bolt of energy through his chest. He fell backward with hatred in his eyes. Does being a gold Demon Slayer give you the right to kill openly? And right in front of me, a powerful voice came from the entrance. An old man in black training clothes walked in. Sharp eyes, light steps, a small white goatee on his chin. Behind him followed a middle-aged man in Demon Slayer uniform, Zhao Jinyu. I asked the old man if he was the current Haicheng Demon Slayer commander. He announced himself proudly, Su Qianming. He said he never expected the famous gold Demon Slayer number 009 to be a teenager, and that he'd come as I demanded. Now what was I going to do about it? I smiled, stepped forward, and dropped my full spiritual pressure onto him. I cracked my neck and stared him down. Guess what would have happened if you hadn't come? The color drained from his face. He could feel exactly how strong that pressure was. You're Peak Grandmaster, he stammered. The whole room went silent when Su Qianming said, Peak Grandmaster. Li Huai was stunned too. He knew I was a Grandmaster, but he never imagined I was at the peak level. Wu Qiuhao, the squad leader who tried to arrest me, looked like his legs were about to give out. Zhao Jinyu, the brigade captain, was clearly relieved he hadn't questioned my identity when he walked in. I released the pressure on Su Qianming and got straight to the point. I asked him 3 questions. First, the Yi and Li families killed my mother. As a gold demon slayer and a member of the martial world, didn't I have the right to avenge her? Second, I'd already sent someone to the Demon Slayer headquarters with orders that no one should come to the Yi or Li estates tonight. Why did they come anyway? Was my authority as a gold Demon Slayer meaningless? Third, as the Haicheng Demon Slayer commander, his subordinates had a serious discipline problem. Shouldn't he take responsibility? Su Qianming had nothing to say. Everything I said was legitimate. Avenging a parent's murder was recognized in the martial world. My orders had been clear and were ignored. His people were at fault. If I were just an innate realm fighter, he could have brushed me off. A gold demon slayer's authority only covered the guard soldiers, not the commander himself. But I was a peak grandmaster. If he pushed back and I decided to act, nobody would dare even collect his body. He bowed and admitted it was his oversight. I didn't push it further. He was a grandmaster and an old man. There was no need to humiliate him. I looked past him at Zhao Jinyu and asked him to explain why his people showed up at the Yi estate. Zhao Jinyu was drenched in cold sweat. Under Demon Slayer regulations, he had to follow a gold Demon Slayer's orders. Wu Qiuhao coming here was the same as disobeying a military command. If this escalated, his career was over. He bowed deeply and promised to fix things immediately. My anger cooled a bit. I told him to take his people and leave. He kicked Wu Qiuhao on the way out and cursed him. Wu Qiuhao just nodded and took it. He was grateful I hadn't turned my anger on him directly. Before they left, I told them not to talk about anything they saw tonight. Zhao Jinyu promised he'd have everyone sign confidentiality agreements. I asked Su Qianming the same thing. He said he knew what to keep quiet about. After they were gone, I looked at my people. Originally, I'd planned to deal with the Yi family and Li family tonight, then wait for my first master Qin Tianlong before going after the Zhang family. He told me before I left prison that he wanted to take part in the revenge personally, but the situation had changed. Su Qianming and his people now knew I was a peak grandmaster. Even though they promised silence, I couldn't be sure nobody in that squad had connections to the Zhang family. If the Zhang family got wind of what happened tonight, they'd flee Haicheng. Hunting them down later would be much harder. I made the call. We'd hit the Li family next, then go straight to the Zhang family. All in one night. No waiting. I told Li Huai's people to sweep the Yi estate for anyone they might have missed. They searched the whole villa and found only servants left. All the fighters were already dead. Yi Haipeng, Yi Zhinshan, and Old Ma were done. The only Yi family members still alive were Li Yanhua at the Li estate and Yi Mingyuan at the Martial Arts Academy. I gave the order. Move out. We're going to the Li family. The Li family estate was packed. All 40-plus core members had gathered in the main hall, arguing about the stock crash. Li Yaozhu, the family patriarch, an innate realm cultivator, sat in the center while everyone else stood around bickering. They were blaming Li Chengxian, the eldest son who ran the company, for letting this happen. Different factions within the family were turning on each other. Li Yaozhu silenced them all with one shout. He told Li Yanhua to call Yi Jinshan and merge the Yi Group's assets with the Li Group to fight back against the mystery funds. Li Yanhua shrugged and said Yi Jinshan was probably getting yelled at by his father. She'd already suggested a merger earlier, but Yi Haiping wasn't ready to give up control. Secretly, she had her own reasons for stalling. A forced merger now would leave her with nothing, while waiting until Yi Haiping died and Yi Jinshan inherited would let her bargain for a better share. Then a man in a white suit burst in shouting that someone was storming the estate. A young man with 10 others. One of them claimed they now held 55% of the Li Group and were here to take back the property. Li Yaozhu laughed coldly. He'd been trying to find whoever was behind the financial attack, and now they'd come to him. He ordered everyone to prepare for battle and told his security chief to surround the estate. The security chief hesitated. He said the guards had already engaged us, but they were getting destroyed. The young man leading the group was an innate realm fighter who killed their guard captain with a single shot of energy. The other 10 were all acquired realm. The guards were suffering heavy losses. Li Yaozhu was confused. A young innate cultivator? He asked how old. Around 20, maybe not even that. He couldn't understand why someone that talented would bother with the Li family. Those kinds of prodigies belonged to the top families on the entire planet. He suspected the security chief misjudged the intruder's age. Some innate fighters looked younger than they were. He led all 40 family members outside. When he reached the front steps, he stopped and looked across the courtyard. Bodies of his guards littered the ground everywhere. His entire security force, 7 or 8 acquired fighters, and over 30 body-tempering warriors, wiped out in the time it took for one man to deliver a message. I walked toward him with Li Huai and the 9 fighters behind me. It's him. Li Yanhua's voice came from behind Li Yaozhu. He turned to her. She confirmed I was Yi Jinshan's illegitimate son, the one they'd framed and sent to prison for Yi Mingyuan's crime. Another Li family member chimed in, saying he remembered me from the Rift World incident, that my master was Qin Tianlong. Li Yaozhu turned back to me and asked if I was the one targeting his family. I stared past him at Li Yanhua. I told him he had it wrong. I wasn't targeting the Li family. I was going to erase them from existence. He laughed. He thought Qin Tianlong was hiding somewhere nearby, pulling strings. He shouted into the darkness, challenging my master to come out and face him. His aura exploded outward. I raised an eyebrow. He was stronger than the intelligence suggested, not just entry-level innate, but lesser achievement innate. Interesting, but it didn't matter. I told him to stop barking. My master wasn't here. Dealing with a small family like his didn't require my master's presence. He was confused. He looked at the 10 people behind me, trying to figure out which one of them was the innate fighter doing the killing. He spotted Li Huai and recognized him as Ghost 7 from the Azure Dragon gang. He asked if Qin Tianlong had given the gang to me. Not once did it cross his mind that I was the innate fighter. He was convinced someone stronger was hiding behind me, doing the real work. Li Yaozhu refused to believe I was the innate realm fighter. He looked at the 10 people behind me, waiting for someone to step forward. When nobody did, he mocked whoever was hiding in the group. I rolled my eyes and told him I was standing right in front of him. Li Yanhua spoke up from behind her father. She called me a bastard and said I was just a regular person a year ago, so there was no way I could be innate realm. She insisted someone stronger was hiding in the shadows and that I was just bait. Li Yaozhu agreed with her. He said he'd been in the martial world for 50 or 60 years and never heard of anything so ridiculous. He figured if he captured me, whoever was really behind this would show themselves. He charged at me with a weak burst of innate energy. He wanted to take me alive, not kill me. I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. The crack echoed through the courtyard. He hit the ground face first, his left cheek swelling up instantly. He was completely stunned. In his mind, grabbing some kid should have been effortless. He never even saw my hand move. He scrambled back to his feet, pressing his cheek, using energy to push down the swelling. He finally started to realize I wasn't just innate. I was something far beyond that. I stepped forward. He stepped back. Every step I took, he retreated. The entire Li family watched their pillar of strength being pushed backward by someone who looked like a teenager. The arrogance drained from their faces and was replaced by fear. Then someone shoved Li Yanhua out of the crowd. It was her own brother. He shouted that I was here for her and she shouldn't drag the whole family down with her. She stumbled forward and denied it, but her shaking voice gave her away. Li Yaozhu tried playing peacemaker. He suggested there must be a misunderstanding between me and Li Yanhua. He called her my little stepmother and said we should just talk it out. He said replacing Yi Mingyuan in prison wasn't a big deal. Brothers help brothers, so why make a fuss? I gave him a thumbs up for having the thickest skin I'd ever seen. I told him 15 years in prison for something I didn't do wasn't a small thing. If he thought it was, then me wiping out his entire family tonight shouldn't be a big deal either. He asked what I wanted. Compensation? I laughed. His whole company already belonged to me. What could he possibly offer? Then I got to the real point. I looked at Li Yanhua and asked if she'd forgotten what she did 13 years ago. I turned back to Li Yaozhu and told him to stop playing dumb. He was the one who cleaned up after her. Li Yanhua flinched and hid behind her father. Li Yaozhu went quiet. I could see him remembering. 13 years ago, Li Yanhua came home crying because she found out Yi Jinshan had a child with another woman. Li Yaozhu was furious. He'd never wanted his daughter to marry that useless man in the first place. Then Li Yanhua told him she'd already had my mother killed. She wanted to keep me alive to torture slowly. But she'd been sloppy, leaving evidence everywhere. So Li Yaozhu stepped in and made the whole thing disappear through his connections at the security bureau. His expression turned cold. He dropped the act. He told me that back then, Li Yanhua wanted to keep me around to torment, and he agreed. He said he never expected a wild seed like me would become a real threat after 13 years. He admitted he'd been too soft. Then he pulled a jade bottle from his coat and swallowed a red pill. His aura exploded. His power surged from lesser achievement innate to greater achievement in seconds. His whole body was shaking. Whatever that pill was, it was clearly agonizing. A few seconds later, his energy reached peak innate level. He snarled at me through clenched teeth, asking if I really thought reaching innate realm was enough to bully the Li family. He asked if I thought a family ranked 4th in Haicheng had no hidden cards. He launched himself at me. His innate energy formed a massive palm in the air and crashed down toward me. I swatted it apart with one hand. Then I dropped my spiritual pressure onto him. 3 meters from me, his knees buckled and he slammed into the ground. He looked up at me, trembling. "You're a grandmaster." I released my full spiritual pressure, not just grandmaster peak level, but my true condensation realm greater achievement power. The air itself seemed to tremble. Li Yaozhu had just managed to straighten up, but the force slammed him flat on the ground, face down. He couldn't even kneel. He was completely pinned. The pressure spilled outward, and everyone around felt it. Li Huai had no cultivation at all, so he had to retreat. The bald fighter stepped in front of him to block the shockwave. I walked over and stepped on Li Yaozhu's back. I told him that swallowing a pill to boost himself to peak innate was pointless. Without a body strong enough to handle it, the power meant nothing. I pressed down. He coughed up blood, and his boosted energy collapsed instantly. He turned his head sideways and growled that even a peak grandmaster shouldn't be able to suppress a peak innate fighter with spiritual force alone. He demanded to know what I really was. I leaned down and told him he knew too much. Then I put a bolt of energy through his skull. The Li family erupted into panic. Some women screamed. People tried to run. I spread my spiritual force across the courtyard and pinned all 40-something of them to the ground. None of them could move. I gave the order. "Li Huai, do it." Li Huai nodded and waved his people forward. "Kill them. Leave no one." The 9 fighters drew their weapons. The bald guy charged first, cutting through them one by one. "Don't kill me," Li Yanhua screamed. "Yi Wu Dao, do you want to know the truth about who you really are? Spare me, and I'll tell you." I stopped. I turned around and told them to keep her alive and bring her to me. I walked outside. I was still young. I didn't want to watch the rest. The middle-aged woman grabbed Li Yanhua by the back of her collar and dragged her out like a kitten. Behind us, the screaming continued. Outside the gate, I asked Li Yanhua what she meant by true identity. She said she'd only talk if I promised not to kill her and gave her money. I crouched down and asked if she thought she was in any position to bargain. She gathered her courage. She said she was the only person alive who knew the truth. Even Yi Jinshan didn't know. She said my mother's death had more to it than I realized. She asked me if I'd ever wondered how the truck driver died in prison. The Li family had influence. but not enough to kill someone inside the first prison. Even Zhang Jianya wouldn't dare do that. That got my attention. She had a point. Zhang Jianya had threatened to come after me and my masters in the first prison, but he never did. If even he was afraid to act inside those walls, how did an ordinary truck driver end up dead there? I'd always assumed he died of illness. Now I wasn't so sure. I called Li Huai over and asked what he knew about the driver's death. He said the records listed it as death by illness, but the driver had no medical history and no treatment records in prison. Dying of disease within 6 months of entering prison with no prior health problems was suspicious, though sudden heart failure couldn't be ruled out. Li Yanhua cut in. She said the driver wasn't sick, he was murdered. She'd visited him in prison because she was afraid he'd expose her. He told her he'd received the order to kill my mother long before she posted her own hit on the black market. He simply took both jobs at once for double the pay. He'd already accepted he would die and just wanted the money to go to his family. Later, she went to the black market to investigate the other contract on my mother, and that's when she discovered my mother's secret. By the time she went back to check on the driver, he was already dead. I told her everything she said was just her word with no proof. How did I know she wasn't lying to save herself? She swore she was telling the truth. And then she dropped something I didn't expect. Yi Zhinshan has dead sperm disease. He can't father children. She said I could test Yi Mingyuan's DNA against Yi Zhinshan's. There'd be no match. Yi Mingyuan was actually the son of her first boyfriend. Yi Zhinshan never knew about his condition. Li Yanhua only figured it out this year when she noticed 17-year-old Yi Mingyuan was starting to look more and more like her ex. She had Yi Zhinshan's sperm tested and discovered the truth. Then she connected it to what she'd found years ago while investigating my mother. She realized I probably wasn't Yi Zhinshan's son either. She'd killed the wrong person. I frowned. There was an obvious hole in her story. If neither Yi Mingyuan nor I were Yi Zhinshan's sons, why did we look so much alike? Li Yanhua took a breath and said, "Because your real father and my ex-boyfriend are brothers. Technically, you should be calling me Annie." The more Li Yanhua talked, the more confused I got. She was saying Yi Zhinshan wasn't my real father, and that Yi Mingyuan and I were actually cousins. I told her to slow down and explain everything clearly. She started with something that happened 18 years ago, the year the rift in Haicheng was breached. I checked with Li Huai, and he confirmed it. That year, many fighters came to help defend against the monsters pouring through. Among them were my real father, his brother, and my mother. Li Yanhua said my mother wasn't an ordinary woman. She had a refined quality that common people didn't have. She was from the Wu family in the capital, a top-tier family with a grandmaster-level cultivator. That pulled me back to a memory from when I was 5. My mother had stroked my head and said, "Wu Dao, when you grow up, Mama will take you to the capital." I didn't think anything of it back then. Now I understood. She wanted to take me to the Wu family. I interrupted and asked whether Yi Zhinshan really assaulted my mother and whether she really went to him for child support money. Li Yanhua confirmed the assault but corrected the rest. My mother wasn't asking for child support. She was asking for a loan. She was penniless and desperate, and Yi Zhinshan owed her for what he'd done. What Lu Jin told me earlier was just drunk rambling from Yi Zhinshan, not the full truth. I asked why my mother didn't go to the Wu family instead. Li Yanhua's answer hit hard. My real father's family had been wiped out. Every single person connected to them was hunted down and killed. My mother knew that going back to the Wu family would put them in danger, and put me in danger too. So she spent years hiding, moving from place to place with me. I asked Li Yanhua how she survived if her boyfriend was my father's brother. She said her relationship was secret. Nobody knew about it. My mother, on the other hand, had followed my father from the capital to Haicheng, so people knew about her. I asked the real question: who was my father, and who destroyed his family? Li Yanhua took a deep breath. My father's name was Yi Zhenhua. Her boyfriend, my father's younger brother, was Yi Zhenyu. They were from the Yi family of the capital. The family that destroyed them was the Fu family. Specifically, a man named Fu Yinglong. 18 years ago, the brothers were secretly sent to Haicheng by the Yi family elders. By the time they learned what was happening back home, the entire Yi family had already been massacred. My father left Haicheng first, telling my mother to stay and not return to the capital. She was already pregnant with me at the time, so she went to work as a maid at the local Yi household, which is how she ended up being assaulted by Yi Zhinshan. 8 months later, Yi Jinyu went to the capital looking for his brother. A week later, Li Yanhua found out both brothers were dead. Heartbroken, she agreed to her father's arrangement and married Yi Zhinshan 2 weeks later. She didn't realize she was already carrying Yi Jinyu's child, Yi Mingyuan. I asked why she still had my mother killed if she knew the truth. She shook her head. She said she only discovered all of this afterward, when the truck driver told her someone else had also put a hit on my mother through the black market. She investigated and uncovered my mother's real background. By then, my mother was already dead. She only figured out I wasn't Yi Jinshan's son this year after discovering Yi Jinshan was infertile. He had dead sperm disease. He couldn't father children. Yi Mingyuan wasn't his son either. Once she realized that, she connected it to what she knew about my mother and concluded I must be Yi Jinhua's son. I asked her bluntly, if she knew I wasn't Yi Jinshan's kid, why did she still let me take the fall for Yi Mingyuan's crime? She said Yi Jinshan was the one who pushed for it. She'd wanted to just pay money to make the case go away, but Yi Jinshan said it would be cheaper to frame me since I looked so much like Yi Mingyuan. She went along with it because she didn't want to expose any of the deeper secrets. She added that if the Fu family ever found out the Yi bloodline survived, everyone connected would be killed, including me. Li Huai spoke up then. He asked if she meant the Yi family from the capital massacre. She was surprised he knew. He said of course he knew. He was from the capital himself. It wasn't just the Yi family that was destroyed. His own Li family, plus the Hu and Qin families, 4 great families in total, all wiped out. I asked Li Huai to explain. He said it was really a battle over the dragon vein, a source of power hidden beneath the Forbidden Palace. Fu Yinglong had been stuck at peak Grandmaster for years and wanted to drain the dragon vein's power to break through to the next level. The 4 families were the vein's guardians and refused. War broke out, but none of the 4 families had a peak Grandmaster, and even combined they couldn't match the Fu family. The dragon vein was taken, and all 4 families were massacred. Only a handful of people were smuggled out beforehand. Li Huai was one of them. He fled to Haicheng and eventually met Qin Tianlong. I asked about Fu Yinglong. If he'd been stuck at peak Grandmaster for that long 18 years ago, he was likely one of the Demon Slayer founders. Li Huai confirmed it. Fu Yinglong, along with Li Chenghua and Du Yuan, were called the 3 supreme masters of the martial world. I nodded and told Li Huai he'd be coming with me to the capital once we finished in Haicheng. I wanted to see how strong these 3 supreme masters really were. Li Huai's eyes lit up. He'd been dreaming of avenging his family for years, but never had the strength. Now, with me, he thought there might finally be a chance. He asked what to do about Li Yanhua. I glanced at her and said, kill her. She screamed that I'd promised not to kill her. I spread my hands and told her I said I wouldn't kill her personally. I couldn't control what other people did. The middle-aged woman beside her drew her sword across Li Yanhua's throat. Li Yanhua clutched her neck, staring at me with fading hatred. She tried to beg me to spare Yi Mingyuan, but she couldn't finish the sentence before she collapsed. I looked down at her body. I told her I was sorry, but I couldn't let Yi Mingyuan live. After killing the entire Li family, leaving him alive would just create another enemy who'd come back for revenge someday. Just like when she chose not to kill me as a child, and I became the one who destroyed her family. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. I took a deep breath. Everything I'd learned tonight was a lot to take in. I wasn't Yi Jinshan's bastard son. I was the son of Yi Jinhua, from the capital's Yi family. My mother was from the Wu family in the capital. My real father was killed years ago. 2 of the 3 so-called supreme masters of the martial world were now my enemies. Li Chenghua for the grudge with the Free Spirit sect, and Fu Yinglong for destroying my father's family. The capital was somewhere I had to go, not just for revenge. I also needed to find the Wu family and ask them why they never came looking for my mother. They had a grandmaster. If Li Yanhua could track down my mother's background, the Wu family certainly could have too. Did they not care? Were they afraid? Or had they simply given up on her? I also wanted to fulfill my mother's wish. She probably wanted to go home before she died. The bald fighter came out and reported the Li estate was clean. I looked toward the mountains and said, let's go. Zhang family next. The Zhang family estate sat on top of Azure Dragon Mountain, the best location in all of Haicheng. It used to be Azure Dragon Gang territory before the Zhang family took it after destroying the gang. What I didn't know yet was that the Zhang family was having a party tonight. They had a special guest. We fought our way up from the base of the mountain. The hidden sentries couldn't stop us, and neither could the guard captain they sent down. By the time we reached the villa area, Zhang family guards were retreating in panic. Zhang Jianya was standing at the entrance of his villa. Next to him was a man in his 30s, pale, smooth-faced, not a trace of facial hair, with a strange mix of wealth and feminine energy about him. I'd learned his name was Lu Tianyuan. Zhang Jianya recognized me and Li Huai right away. He told Lu Tianyuan I was Qin Tianlong's disciple from the first prison and that Li Huai was the legendary Ghost 7, the strategist who almost killed him years ago. Lu Tianyuan started shouting into the darkness behind us, calling for Qin Tianlong to show himself. He kept taunting, asking if my master was hiding, asking if he was scared. He got no response because my master wasn't there. I'd heard enough of his weird, squeaky voice. I shouted back, "Hey, you sissy, what are you yelling about? My master hasn't even left prison yet. Stop barking." Lu Tianyuan's face twisted with rage. He asked what I just called him. I said it again, louder. I told him a grown man, pinching his voice like that should be embarrassed. He lost it. "You die today," he screamed. Zhang Jianya tried to play along, offering to grab me and slap my mouth. But he didn't actually move. He was still scanning the surroundings, convinced Qin Tianlong had to be hiding somewhere. He couldn't believe my master would let me come to the Zhang estate with just a group of acquired realm fighters. Lu Tianyuan didn't wait. He launched himself at me through the air. Before coming up the mountain, I'd learned from Li Huai's intel who this Lu Tianyuan was. He was from the Lu family in the capital, connected to one of the 3 supreme masters. He was an innate greater achievement cultivator, and he'd come to Haicheng specifically to help the Zhang family deal with Qin Tianlong. Zhang Jianya had been worried about my master reaching Gold Demon Slayer status and becoming untouchable, so he'd called in this favor. Lu Tianyuan had also tried calling Su Qianming, the Demon Slayer commander, to invite him over socially, since apparently Su Qianming was friends with his grandfather. The call went unanswered. Su Qianming was probably still shaken from our encounter earlier tonight. None of that mattered now. Lu Tianyuan was flying straight at me, and I was ready. Lu Tianyuan flew at me midair and shot a needle of energy from a finger posed like a flower. I swatted it away with one hand. I couldn't help myself. "You really are a sissy." I looked at Li Huai and asked if that was the sunflower manual technique. He confirmed it was. I knew that practicing the sunflower manual didn't require castration, but it did completely destroy a man's ability to function as one. This guy sacrificed that just to get stronger. Lu Tianyuan landed and stared at me, realizing something was wrong. He asked if I was also innate realm. To deflect his needle so casually, I'd need to be at least peak innate. I didn't answer his question. Instead, I pointed out what everyone could see. He'd given up being a man for power. That really set him off. He told Zhang Jianya they should attack together. Zhang Jianya agreed, and they both charged at me. I released my spiritual pressure. Both of them slammed face first into the ground before they even reached me. I walked over and stepped on Zhang Jianya's back. I asked him if he wanted to repeat what he said to me in the Rift World last time, when he called me a bastard. He kept his mouth shut. Back then I was barely at the acquired stage and needed Qin Tianlong's protection. Now I was a real grandmaster, and he knew one wrong word meant death. Lu Tianyuan struggled but quickly realized he couldn't break free. He narrowed his eyes and said, "You're peak grandmaster." He had grandmaster-level elders in his own family, but even both of his grandfathers combined couldn't pin down an innate greater achievement cultivator with spiritual force alone the way I just did. He understood I was far above them. I told him to wait his turn. I'd deal with him after finishing with Zhang Jianya. Zhang Jianya tried threatening me with the Lu family. He said Lu Tianyuan was the eldest grandson of Grandmaster Lu Xiaobai, and that Lu Xiaosong had also recently reached Grandmaster level. 2 Grandmasters together would make even a peak Grandmaster think twice. I stepped harder on his shoulder and asked if he'd lost his mind. The Lu family's own grandson was lying right next to him and hadn't said a word. Who was Zhang Jianya to throw around the Lu name? I told him 2 low-level Grandmasters couldn't do anything against a peak Grandmaster. I even offered to let Lu Tianyuan call them and see if they dared show up. Zhang Jianya looked at Lu Tianyuan hopefully and suggested calling. Lu Tianyuan just rolled his eyes and said nothing. That told Zhang Jianya everything. The Lu family's boasting about matching a peak Grandmaster was just that, boasting. Something broke inside the old man. He suddenly aged 10 years right in front of me. He asked what I wanted. I told him I'd do to the Zhang family exactly what they did to the Azure Dragon gang. My master wanted to handle this personally, but I had places to be, so I was settling it now. I asked if he had any last words. He surprised me. He laughed and said, "Those who kill will be killed. Those who sin will be punished." He admitted he'd killed many people and done terrible things to reach the top of Haicheng. He always knew karma would catch up. He just didn't expect it to arrive so soon, or fall on him directly. He told me to do whatever I wanted. I almost respected that. Unlike Li Yaozhu and Yi Haiping, who begged and schemed until the very end, Zhang Jianya seemed to actually accept his fate. Then he suddenly shouted to all Zhang family members, "Run! Save yourselves! As many as you can! I should have known." His whole speech was just to buy time and distract me so his people could scatter. He'd already accepted death, but he still wanted the Zhang bloodline to survive. I told him none of them would make it. I put a bolt of energy through his head, then shifted all my spiritual pressure onto the fleeing family members. Every single one of them was forced to their knees. Li Huai shouted the order and drew his own blade. He'd waited 10 years for this moment. The 9 fighters charged in. Lu Tianyuan stood up once I released his pressure. I told him not to move or he'd die. He asked if he could make a phone call. I shrugged and told him to go ahead. If he wanted to invite his grandfathers to come die too, that was fine with me. He called Su Qianming first. When the old commander picked up, Lu Tianyuan asked him to use the Demon Slayer's heavy weapons against me. After a pause, Su Qianming asked if the peak grandmaster he was talking about was named Yi Wudao. Lu Tianyuan was confused that Su Qianming knew me. Su Qianming told him flatly that he couldn't help. I was not only a peak grandmaster, but also a gold demon slayer. Using military weapons against me would be suicide. He told Lu Tianyuan to call his grandfathers and hung up. Lu Tianyuan stared at the dead phone for a while. Then he looked at my face and finally understood this was beyond him. He called his grandfather Lu Xiaobai in a panic, nearly crying, begging for help. The other end went quiet for a long moment. Then Lu Xiaobai's voice came through. "Wait there. Your uncle and I are coming." I watched Lu Tianyuan make his call and laughed. "You actually called them. Good. Saves me a trip to the capital." Time passed. Li Huai and the 9 fighters finished clearing out the Zhang family. Over 100 people, all gone. I stared up at the stars, waiting. Half an hour later, 3 figures came flying through the night sky, trailing long streaks of light behind them. So Lu Tianyuan's grandfathers brought backup. I looked at him and said I figured he knew they'd bring help. He said nothing, but I could see his confidence returning. I asked him a simple question. If whoever they brought wasn't a peak grandmaster, did he really think they could beat me? The 3 landed outside the villa and walked toward us. 2 of them looked almost identical, old twin brothers, one in white, one in black. Those had to be Lu Xiaobai and Lu Xiaosong. Between them walked a 3rd old man, their hired help. The one on the left spoke first, asking if I was really Yi Wudao and why I was so young. I told him to introduce himself before asking questions. He said he was Lu Xiaobai. The man in the middle was Lu Xianin, the Demon Slayer commander of Magic City and a greater achievement grandmaster. The 3rd was his brother Lu Xiaosong. I raised an eyebrow. "Just you 3? Lu Xiaobai frowned and said I was being arrogant. He claimed the 3 of them together might be more than I could handle. His brother Lu Xiaosong tried a different approach, the moral high ground. He said he knew I was Gold Demon Slayer number 009 and asked why a peak grandmaster would bother picking on his grandson, an innate cultivator. Didn't I have any dignity? I laughed hard. Dignity? 10 years ago, the Lu family sent their guards across 1,000 kilometers to help the Zhang family destroy the Azure Dragon Gang. Was that dignified? And I was only 18, his grandson was over 30. By age, Lu Tianyuan was no junior of mine. By cultivation level, all 3 of them were below me. Shouldn't juniors bow to their elders? I noticed a pattern with these big families. Their first move was always moral pressure. The trick was to throw it right back at them. Lu Xiaosong asked if I was from the Azure Dragon Gang and whether this was revenge. I told him obviously, I wasn't insane enough to kill his grandson for no reason. Lu Xiaobai spoke up. He said his grandson, Lu Tianyuan, had been crippled years ago by Qin Tianlong's son, who kicked him so hard he could never function as a normal man again. That's why Lu Tianyuan had to practice the Sunflower Manual. The Lu family had every right to seek revenge, and they didn't personally destroy the Azure Dragon Gang. They only sent their guards. The Zhang family did the actual killing. Then Lu Xianin stepped in as peacemaker. He said the grudge between the Lu family and the Azure Dragon Gang was old history, and since I'd already wiped out the Zhang family, the ones who actually did the deed, things should be settled. He offered to mediate and let everyone walk away. I laughed in his face. You want to mediate? Who do you think you are? He announced himself proudly. Lu Xianin, Greater Achievement Grandmaster, Permanent Demon Slayer Commander of Magic City, one of the few who held a fixed post rather than rotating yearly. Then he played his trump card. His senior martial brother was Fu Yinglong, one of the 3 Supreme Masters. The moment he said that name, everything changed. I burst out laughing. If you hadn't mentioned Fu Long, you might have walked away alive tonight. But now that you have, sorry. All three of you are dying here. Lu Xiaonan was confused. He expected Fu Long's name to frighten me. He asked if I had a grudge with his senior brother. I told him the truth. Before today, I had no personal beef with Fu Long. But today I'd learned I was a descendant of the Yi family from the capital, one of the 4 families massacred 18 years ago in the Dragon Vein War. My mother's death was partly because of what the Fu family did. So yes, we had a grudge now. Lu Xianan's eyes went wide. You're a survivor of the capital Yi family. He instantly unleashed his spiritual force at me and screamed at the Lu brothers to attack together. Either he dies today, or we all do. The brothers exchanged a glance. They knew there was no talking their way out. Their family had sent guards to help slaughter over 1,000 Azure Dragon gang members. Qin Tianlong's entire family was killed except for Qin Tianlong himself, who escaped into prison. That kind of blood debt doesn't get negotiated away. The 3 of them combined meant 1 greater achievement grandmaster and 2 lesser achievement grandmasters coming at me together. On paper, that wasn't terrible. Against a normal peak grandmaster, they might have had a shot. I was excited. Everything up to now had been one-sided slaughter against innate fighters. This was the first real test, 3 grandmasters at once. I could finally see what I was truly capable of. I let my spiritual power explode outward. Their combined force crashed into mine, and the air hummed with the collision. Behind me, Li Huai shouted for everyone to fall back. He warned that if an acquired realm cultivator got caught in a grandmaster-level spiritual clash, their brain would be crushed like paper. The 9 fighters retreated immediately. Lu Xiaonan sneered that a peak grandmaster was nothing special. Their 3 spiritual forces combined were actually pushing mine back past the midline. He thought they were winning. I'd only released about 1/3 of my power, roughly what a real peak grandmaster would have. I wanted to test things first. I noticed from what Lu Xiaonan said about the 3 supreme masters that they were probably cultivators who had touched the threshold of the condensation realm, but couldn't break through without the right technique. Good to know. I smiled and said, playtime's over. Time to send you on your way. I unleashed my full condensation realm greater achievement spiritual force. The pressure wave slammed into all 3 of them instantly. Lu Xiaonan went from confident to panicked in under a second. His spiritual force was crushed back to within a meter of his body. The Lu brothers were completely trapped, faces turning red as they struggled. Lu Xiaobai broke free first by exploding his innate energy outward. Lu Xiaosong followed and shouted to Lu Xiaonan to stop fighting me with spiritual force. He realized I wasn't just peak grandmaster. I was half a step above. Lu Xiaonan switched tactics too, coating himself in energy and drawing his sword. Lu Xiaonan couldn't understand how I'd reached this level at 18. He knew from Demon Slayer records that I was suspected of having a martial Dao sacred body, an incredibly rare constitution that appeared only a handful of times throughout history. Every person who had it dominated their entire era. He'd read in ancient texts that some sacred body cultivators ascended to land immortal status in their 20s. But even so, this age had its limits. The 3 supreme masters only reached their half-step level through decades of accumulation, not talent. I'd been cultivating for just 1 year. Lu Xiaobai didn't care about any of that. He just knew they'd die if they didn't fight with everything they had. He screamed at Lu Xiaonan to stop thinking and start killing. All 3 came at me together. I used my phantom steps and charged. I wasn't bothering with weapons. Against 3 grandmasters, I didn't need them at my level. My afterimage blurred past Lu Xiaobai. By the time he turned his head, I was already standing in front of Lu Xiaosong. He didn't even see me move. Lu Xiaosong raised his palm and launched a massive energy attack called Cloud Parting Palm, a giant hand of concentrated innate energy flying at me. I raised 2 fingers and fired a single drop of innate true liquid. It punched straight through his palm technique like paper, scattering the energy into nothing, and slammed into his chest. He looked down. There was a fist-sized hole where his heart used to be. He'd poured every drop of energy into defending that spot, and it still wasn't enough. He whispered, double penetrating force. Projected. Then he reached toward his brother, managed to say, run, and fell backward. Lu Xiaobai screamed his brother's name. But grief didn't destroy his thinking. He'd once seen the Supreme Masters Li Changhua and Du Yuan fight. Even at the half-step level, they weren't this strong. The liquid form energy I used was the signature of someone truly above the Grandmaster realm. He realized I wasn't half-step above, I was the real thing. He turned and ran on foot. Smart. Running on the ground was faster and more agile than flying. Lu Xiaonan had already taken to the sky, fleeing before Lu Xiaobai even moved. I pointed out that for a greater achievement grandmaster, he was less clever than the lesser achievement one. I flicked a drop of true liquid at Lu Xiaonan. He felt death coming and threw up a wall of energy behind himself. It didn't matter. The drop punched through his back and out his chest, leaving the same fist-sized hole. He fell from the sky and crashed into the ground. He watched me chase Lu Xiaobai, but couldn't speak. His eyes slowly closed. I used light smoke steps to catch Lu Xiaobai in 2 seconds flat. I asked him if he really thought he could outrun me. One palm to the top of his skull, and he face-planted into the dirt, dead. Gang leader. Lu Tianyuan is running, Li Huai shouted from behind me. I turned and saw that little weasel sprinting down the mountainside into the forest. He'd waited until I chased his grandfather, then bolted without looking back. Clever, but not clever enough. I flew after him. 5 seconds later, I was right behind him. Did you think I'd forget about you? He nearly fainted from terror. His legs buckled. I flicked 1 drop of true liquid at him. Without a grandmaster's massive energy reserves to protect him, his upper body simply exploded. After finishing off the 4 of them, I flew back up to the Zhang family villa. Li Huai and the others were waiting. I asked if everyone was accounted for. Li Huai shook his head. Several Zhang family members weren't present tonight, including Zhang Jianya's second son, Zhang Yuanlin, the very person my second master wanted revenge against. That was a problem. Li Huai said it was strange because their intelligence confirmed Zhang Yuanlin arrived at Azure Dragon Mountain for the party, but his body wasn't among the dead. They'd used every resource to locate him. Everyone else was tracked down, but Zhang Yuanlin had seemingly vanished. He entered the mountain but never left. I told them to wait while I searched the villa myself. I flew to the top and spread my spiritual power across the entire building, scanning every room from the top floor down to the basement. Nothing alive. I was about to give up when I caught a faint flicker. Not a sound, not movement, but the tiniest pulse of life force. It came from beneath the basement floor, near a large wooden barrel in the corner. When I focused all my spiritual power on it, the signal disappeared. When I pulled back, it returned. I tried moving the barrel with spiritual force. It wouldn't budge. I crushed it, just water and wood splinters. The barrel had been glued to the floor, but there was no trapdoor, no mechanism underneath. Then the pulse came again, clearly rising from below the floor itself. I pushed my spiritual power downward. Everywhere else in the basement, I could sense about 3 meters deep, but directly under where the barrel stood, my spiritual force was completely blocked. Something down there was made of a material that cut off spiritual detection entirely. I called everyone to the basement. I tried cutting through the floor with a borrowed saber, a half-meteorite blade. The saber shattered on impact. The floor didn't even crack, just a faint white scratch. Whatever this material was, it was incredibly hard. I told Li Huai to find a switch. Within moments, he spotted a bronze deer head sculpture on the wall that looked out of place. He twisted its antler. Gears rumbled. The floor's section slowly rose, revealing a hidden passage, steep stairs descending into total darkness. We grabbed flashlights and headed down, me in front. Li Huai studied the tunnel walls as we walked and said the carving marks were ancient, at least several hundred years old, possibly over 1,000. I asked if the Azure Dragon Gang had ever found this passage when they controlled the mountain. He said no. Back then, they never built underground structures here. The tunnel went down for over a kilometer. At the bottom, my spiritual power hit another door made of that same impenetrable material. I pushed it open. Faint light spilled out. Behind the stone door was a small room, roughly bedroom-sized. In the center stood a small stone platform that looked like some kind of altar. Standing on top of it was Zhang Yuanlin. He wasn't panicked at all. He smiled calmly and said he wasn't surprised we found him. He'd discovered this tunnel years ago while building the villa's foundation. Even his father never knew it existed. Then he asked if I knew what this place was. I didn't answer. Something about him felt off. He laughed wildly. This is an ancient altar for ascending to heaven, a gateway to the celestial realm. It was only used once before it was buried. I spent years researching to learn this. He stared at me with crazed eyes and shouted, "Yi Wu Dao. Once I ascend to the heavens and master my cultivation there, the day I return will be the day you die." Then he looked down at the altar beneath his feet and started muttering like a madman. Soon, I'm about to ascend to heaven and become an immortal, One of my fighters stepped forward, ready to kill Zhang Yuanlin. I stopped him. Something about the altar beneath Zhang Yuanlin's feet felt dangerous. The moment I said that, the altar burst with blue light, wrapping Zhang Yuanlin completely. He laughed in triumph. Then the light contracted violently, and the underground space began to shake. Zhang Yuanlin's laughter turned to screaming. Blood poured from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. His eyes bulged. He shrieked. This was supposed to be the path to heaven. Who are you? Then his body went rigid. His head dropped and snapped back up. The instant it did, I felt something horrifying. A wave of evil energy exploded from his body, so powerful it nearly suffocated me. I shouted for everyone to get out. They tried to run, but a crushing spiritual force slammed them all to the floor. I was the only one still standing, and my legs were shaking. This pressure was far beyond anything I'd ever felt. Zhang Yuanlin spoke, but it wasn't his voice anymore. It was ancient and dripping with malice. He said he was surprised to find a condensation realm cultivator down here. He said my body would make a fine vessel. I didn't hesitate. I pulled the dark iron spear from my storage ring, charged it with true liquid, and fired a triple penetrating force shot straight at him. He raised one hand casually. My attack, the strongest thing I could produce, stopped dead in front of his palm. He couldn't be moved. He laughed and called himself by son. Then he shouted toward the ceiling. Zhang Sanfeng, you never predicted this. Once I take this body, I'm coming to the spirit realm to find you. Li Huai recognized the name immediately. He shouted that this was the 100 Losses Taoist, the leader of the 10,000 demon sect, Zhang Sanfeng's greatest enemy from 400 years ago. According to the ancient texts Li Huai had read in his family's library, Zhang Sanfeng killed him. Bai Sun was the creator of the mysterious ice palm and the demon cloud palm, the same technique that the supreme master Li Chenghua practiced. Bai Sun laughed at being remembered after 4 centuries, but he sneered at the legends. He said Zhang Sanfeng was only at Martial Gaul realm, not a real land immortal as people now believed. He said Zhang Sanfeng wasn't worthy of being called his lifelong rival, and he didn't defeat Bai Sun fairly. He used a trick, building this altar to seal him. I asked him directly. So this place wasn't a gateway to heaven, it was his prison? He confirmed it. Though he said the altar really could connect to the spirit realm, it just hadn't been activated. The information Zhang Yuanlin found was correct, but Zhang Yuanlin didn't know how to activate it properly, and anyone who tried would be vulnerable to possession by Bai Sun, unless they were far stronger than him. He told me to stop talking and hand over my body. Then he lunged. I jumped back. After seeing him stop my strongest attack with one hand, I knew the gap between us was enormous. But just as he reached the edge of the altar, a yin-yang symbol appeared above it. White light cascaded down from its edges like a curtain, forming a barrier around the entire altar. Bai Sun slammed into it and was thrown back. He struck the barrier with a palm of black energy, the demon cloud palm. The yin-yang symbol shook but held firm. He coughed blood. He cursed Zhang Sanfeng, realizing the seal included a manifestation of Zhang Sanfeng's martial will, the mark of someone who had reached the divine transformation realm. Bai Sun looked at his borrowed body, Zhang Yuanlin's body, and muttered that if it were just a bit stronger, he could have broken through. He turned to me and demanded I walk involuntarily. With my condensation realm body, he could shatter the barrier and escape. I laughed at him. You want me to just walk in and give you my body? You've been sealed for 400 years and it's made you stupid. I told him to sit tight. When I was strong enough to deal with him, I'd come back. He tried to stop me from leaving. His spiritual force crashed down on me like a mountain. I released everything I had, all my true liquid, to resist. His target was me alone, so Li Huai and the others weren't pinned. Li Huai called out from the stone doorway, asking if I could hold. I told him to go ahead, that I could manage. This old monster was trapped inside the barrier and could only use spiritual pressure against me. I could endure it. Then Bai Sun coughed blood again. Zhang Yuanlin's body was too weak to sustain him. The pressure on me vanished instantly. I looked back and saw Zhang Yuanlin's corpse collapsed on the altar. Above it floated a shadowy figure made of black mist, Bai Sun's true form. The shadow stared at me and shouted, "If you ever want to reach the spirit realm, this is the only way. I don't believe you'll never come back. And I don't believe you can reach the Martial Gaul realm. Even in our era, there were no complete cultivation methods for it. You can't escape me. I'll be waiting." His voice faded. The black mist dissolved. The yin-yang barrier above the altar disappeared too. Only Zhang Yuanlin's body remained on the stone platform. I stood there thinking, Martial Gaul Realm, Divine Transformation Realm, the Spirit Realm. These were levels and places I'd never heard of. And this Baisun had survived for 400 years without a physical body, something I didn't even know was possible. But he was right about one thing. If the Spirit Realm existed and this altar was a gateway, I would eventually need to come back here. I just needed to be strong enough to deal with him when I did. I took one last look at the altar, closed the stone door, and headed back up through the tunnel. Back at the tunnel entrance, I told Li Huai to seal the passage with titanium alloy and make sure no one could ever get in. This mountain would become the Azure Dragon Gang's new headquarters. I gave Li Huai 3 days to announce the gang's return, consolidate all the assets from the Yi, Li, and Zhang families, assign roles to the 9 fighters, and get everything running. After 3 days, we'd head to the capital. Li Huai asked quietly if we were still going after Yi Mingyuan. I told him I'd handle that alone. He should focus on the gang's business. I took one last look down the dark tunnel. The Spirit Realm, I muttered. After meeting Baisun, I couldn't stop thinking about what lay beyond this world. I was at Condensation Realm Greater Achievement now, only 2 minor stages from Martial Golden Core. Once I mastered the Taiji Heart Sutra, I could probably break through. Whether the Martial Gaul Realm came after that, I need to fuse more techniques to find out. But according to Baisun, the Martial Gaul Realm was the level needed to leave Blue Star for the Spirit Realm. I flew toward Haicheng's Martial Arts Academy using my phone's navigation. The academy wasn't big, just 5 buildings. It only accepted students with exceptional martial talent or those from powerful families with decent ability. People like me, growing up in an orphanage with nothing, could never have gotten near the front gate. Standing at the entrance, I felt a wave of emotion. Every boy dreams of becoming a great warrior someday. I used to dream of entering this academy. Now my goals had moved far beyond it. I wanted to chase the peak of martial arts, reach the legendary land Immortal Realm, and see a bigger world. A security guard yelled at me to leave. I ignored him and floated into the air, flying over the gate. I heard him stammering behind me. He recognized that only Grandmaster-level cultivators could fly without visibly using energy. I'm sure he spent the next few minutes praying I wouldn't come back to punish him. It was 2 in the morning. I landed in a quiet corner and spotted one dormitory building with lights still on. I stopped a student with glasses near the entrance and asked where Yi Mingyuan was. I said I was his cousin. The student told me Yi Mingyuan was at Tranquil Heart Lake behind the back mountain, throwing a birthday party for his girlfriend. I flew to the lake and found a crowd of students gathered in a circle, phone flashlights illuminating 2 people in the center. Yi Mingyuan stood across from a pretty young woman. The crowd was chanting for them to kiss. I spread my spiritual sense and listened closely. The girl, Chen Ximin, was telling Yi Mingyuan quietly that she hadn't agreed to be his girlfriend and he shouldn't push it. But the crowd was too loud for anyone else to hear. Yi Mingyuan leaned in close and whispered threats. He told her this scene was already set up, and if she rejected him publicly, he'd lose face. He said he'd been chasing her for months. Then his tone turned vicious. He told her if she didn't agree, he'd eventually just kidnap her and force himself on her. At least now he was offering her some dignity. Later, she'd get none. A flashy-looking girl behind Chen Ximin was pushing her forward, telling her to just accept Yi Mingyuan. The Yi family was ranked 7th in. Haicheng, his mother was from the Li family ranked 4th. She'd never have to worry about money or cultivation resources again. She shoved Chen Ximin right into Yi Mingyuan's arms. He caught her with a smile. "Let her go," someone shouted. A young man leaped over the crowd and landed next to Yi Mingyuan, throwing a palm strike at his shoulder. Yi Mingyuan shoved Chen Ximin aside and met the attack. They matched each other evenly and both stepped back. Yi Mingyuan glared. "Wang Zijian, you just won't go away." Wang Zijian ignored him and went straight to Chen Ximin. He apologized for being late. He'd been training. She shook her head, and the tears she'd been holding back finally fell. I watched the whole scene from above. I'd come here to kill Yi Mingyuan, but I wasn't in a rush. I wanted to see what kind of person he really was first. Now I knew. Exactly the same as his adopted father Yi Zhinshan. Threatening women, forcing himself on people weaker than him. The apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. Yi Mingyuan saw Wang Zijian comforting Chen Ximin and lost his temper completely. He charged at Wang Zijian with killing intent, using a technique called Dragon Claw. The academy had rules against fighting to the death, but Yi Mingyuan didn't care. He figured he had the Yi and Li families behind him. Getting expelled meant nothing. Wang Zijian was smart enough not to fight back with full force. He was just a regular kid with no powerful family. If he seriously hurt Yi Mingyuan, his life would be over. So he kept dodging. I watched from the back of the crowd, blending in perfectly. I was only 19. I looked just like any other student here, maybe even younger than some. Watching these kids fight over a girl, watching them place bets and joke around, I felt a pang of something I hadn't expected. Envy. I never got to experience any of this. I finished high school and went straight to work. The orphanage only supported us until 18. I never went to college. I never had a campus romance. And then on my 18th birthday, everything went sideways. The atmosphere here, young people full of energy, no scheming old foxes to deal with. I genuinely envied it. Everyone stop! A voice boomed from the sky. An old man came flying in, the academy dean, an innate realm cultivator. Students scattered like roaches. Yi Mingyuan turned to run toward the dormitory. That's when I locked him down with my spiritual pressure. "Who's there?" he shouted, frozen in place. I walked up to him slowly. "Yi Mingyuan." "Long time no see." He stared at me in shock. "How are you out of prison?" I smiled and told him I'd been thinking about him every single day for the past year. It was time to settle things between us. He couldn't understand why he couldn't move. He didn't even recognize spiritual pressure. He was that ignorant about real martial arts. The dean landed and demanded to know who I was, warning that the academy was under the authority of Du Yuan, one of the 3 supreme masters. I glanced at him and told him he talked too much. I gave him my name, Yi Wu Dao, and told him to pass a message to Du Yuan. The person who killed here tonight was me, and Du Yuan could come find me if he had a problem. I increased my spiritual pressure and pinned the dean to the ground. Then I told Yi Mingyuan I was here to settle 2 things: the 11 months he stole from my life, and to reunite him with his family. His father, grandfather, and mother were all already dead. He was the last one. He went pale. He screamed, asking what I'd done to them. I told him I'd sent them ahead, and he was running late. I didn't want him to be lonely down there. He froze, stunned beyond words. I raised my hand and put a bolt of energy through his skull. Students screamed and scattered, terrified. I shook my head. These academy kids had it too easy. My master was right. Flowers raised in a greenhouse can't survive the storm. A scene like this sent them into panic. In the Rift world, they'd be monster food. "Zijian, where are you going?" a worried voice called out. I turned and saw Wang Zijian pulling free from Chun Simin's grip. He walked straight up to me, stopped, and bowed deeply. "Grandmaster, I want to become your disciple." Wang Zijian's bow hit me right in the heart. It took me back 8 months, to my first day in prison, when I did the exact same thing in front of Qin Tianlong. I saw something of myself in this kid. I asked why he wanted me as his master. He stood up straight and said, "Because you're young and you're strong. I feel like following you will make me stronger." I laughed. I liked how direct he was. That was exactly why I chose Qin Tianlong back then. He was the strongest person in the room. I told him I couldn't formally take him as a disciple right now. I had too much to deal with. But if he was willing to wait, I'd accept him as an unofficial student for the time being. I told him to go to Azure Dragon Mountain and find a man called Ghost 7, then train under his 9 acquired realm fighters. He agreed without hesitation. I flew off into the night. Behind me, Chun Simin asked if he was really going through with it. He said yes. He had a feeling this was the path to a brighter future. She said she supported him. Then he kissed her. The academy dean watched me leave with a complicated expression. He'd figured out I was at least greater achievement grandmaster, maybe peak. He wasn't going to report this to Du Yuan. There was no point getting involved with someone this powerful over one dead student. Yi Mingyuan was dead, and if the Yi family was really destroyed, nobody would come asking questions. I went to my mother's grave and sat there all night, talking to her and burning paper offerings. I told her I'd gotten strong. In 3 days, I'd take her remains to the Wu family in the capital so she could finally rest at home. And I'd personally cut off Fu Yinglong's head to avenge her. At dawn, damp with dew, I called Li Huai and told him to arrange people to exhume my mother's coffin. I was bringing her to the capital. His people arrived within half an hour. The whole process, the ceremony, the digging, moving the coffin onto a truck, took until noon. On the drive to Azure Dragon Mountain, Li Huai mentioned that Wang Zijian had already shown up at the base that morning, claiming to be my student. I told Li Huai to put him through training under the 9 fighters. When we got back from the capital, I'd decide whether to officially take him in. We arrived at what used to be the Zhang family villa, now renamed Azure Dragon Villa. The bodies had been cleared, cleaners were scrubbing bloodstains off the floors, and Li Huai had already called back the old Azure Dragon gang members to fill out the ranks. I settled my mother's coffin and went to my room. I checked the news on my phone. The headlines were dominated by one story. The Azure Dragon gang had returned. All three major families, Yi, Li, and Zhang, destroyed in a single night. The mystery funds behind the stock attacks were confirmed to belong to the gang. A new entity called Azure Dragon Group had been established, absorbing every asset from all three families. Nobody in Haicheng dared challenge them. The comment sections were going wild. Everyone speculating about how the gang had gotten so powerful after 10 years in hiding. That afternoon, I took Li Huai to visit my three masters in prison cell number 1. Qin Tianlong laughed bitterly when he heard I'd wiped out all three families in one night without him. He'd been hoping to join me against the Zhang family. I asked if any of them wanted to leave with me. I had the power and the gold demon slayer status to force it. Qin Tianlong declined. He was close to earning his own gold medal and didn't want me to cause problems with the Federation over a premature release. Hu Lianfeng agreed, saying he was comfortable where he was. Zhang Hanquang also chose to stay, figuring the Azure Dragon Gang's intelligence network would have a better chance of finding his missing daughter than him searching alone. I respected their choices. I gave each of them a bottle of stalactite liquid before leaving. I held back the Taiji Heart Sutra for now, partly because Li Huai was present and I didn't want that knowledge spreading too widely yet, and partly because I wanted to finish mastering it first so I could properly guide my masters when the time came. I said goodbye and told them I'd visit again after returning from the capital. Qin Tianlong reminded me to be careful. The capital was the gathering place for all of Blue Star's top families, and they had large-scale weapons specifically designed to keep powerful cultivators in check. I nodded. I knew. 3 days to prepare. Then the capital. 3 days later, I stepped off a private jet at the capital's airport, pushing my mother's coffin. I'd had her remains transferred to a new casket. The old one had rotted in the ground. A hearse was waiting on the tarmac. I told Li Huai to go gather information on the Fu family and the 10,000 Dharma sect. I'd go to the Wu family alone. An hour later, the hearse stopped in front of an old-style courtyard house that had been renovated with new materials but kept its traditional layout. A wooden sign above the gate read, Wu family. I had the driver help me unload the coffin, then send him away. I knocked on the gate. A young man cracked the door open, annoyed at being disturbed so early. He saw me, then noticed the coffin behind me. Without even letting me speak, he told me to get my coffin away from their doorstep. I told him the Wu family needed to teach their children better manners. He got louder, calling me a troublemaker and asking if I knew whose house this was. Before I could respond, a young woman's voice called from inside, telling him to hurry up for practice before their grandfather punished him. The young man shouted for his sister to come look. She walked over, a girl in white training clothes. She was more polite than her brother at least. She asked who I was and what I wanted. I told her my name was Yi Wu Dao, and the coffin held my mother's remains. My mother's name was Wu Wan. The moment she heard that name, her face changed. She shook her head quickly and said there was no one named Wu Wan in the Wu family. She pulled her brother inside and tried to slam the gate shut. I caught the door with one hand. I'd seen the panic flash across her face. She knew the name. I told her calmly that if she didn't know, she should get her parents. I wasn't here to claim family ties. I just wanted my mother to come home. She pushed harder, shouting that I had the wrong place. But no matter how much force she used, the door didn't budge. My hand held it like a steel beam. The wooden frame started creaking under the pressure. She sent her brother to get their father. A group of people came rushing from the inner courtyard. A square-jawed middle-aged man led them. Men, women, young, and old behind him. He told the young woman to step aside and faced me. He introduced himself as Wu Yihai, the current head of the Wu family. He said politely but firmly that nobody named Wu Wan lived here. I should leave. I looked at him carefully. He bore some resemblance to my mother and appeared to be around the same age she would have been. I told him to get his father. His composure broke. He shouted at me to get lost, saying that in the old days, showing up with a coffin at their gate would have gotten me killed hundreds of times over. I studied his reaction. Something was wrong. Any normal family would have attacked me by now for blocking their door with a coffin. The Wu family kept warning me and giving me chances to leave instead. They weren't angry. They were afraid. I said it directly. You're this desperate to deny my mother because you're afraid of Fu Yinglong, aren't you? Wu Yihai froze for a split second before telling me I was talking nonsense and threatening to use force. I told him to go ahead. He punched at my face with everything he had. I caught his fist with one hand and squeezed. His bones cracked and shifted under my grip. He screamed and realized I was at least in 8 realm. He was only peak acquired, nothing. I let go and asked how a family supposedly backed by a grandmaster had fallen this far. The people behind him started shouting, "Let go of our father! Let go of the family head!" But not a single one stepped forward. When I told them to come at me together, they all went silent. I was genuinely confused. This was supposed to be a top-tier capital family, but everyone here was weak and cowardly. Plenty of tough words, zero action. The young ones were like this, and the old ones were no different. How was this family still standing? Then a voice came from behind the crowd. Old, steady, and calm. Young friend, blocking our gate and causing trouble this early in the morning is rather overbearing, wouldn't you say? The Wu family members parted instantly, bowing as an elderly man walked through. Father, grandfather, I watched him approach. Finally, it seemed like someone who could actually hold things together had shown up. I looked at the old man and asked who he was. He said his name was Wu Baohua, the one who held power in the Wu family. That was strange. Wu Yihai had already called himself the family head. Now this Wu Baohua claimed to be the one actually in charge. In the Wu family, the head didn't hold power? I told him plainly that I wasn't here to attach myself to their family. From what I could see, they weren't worth attaching to anyway. I just wanted to know why they refused to acknowledge my mother. I asked if they were this afraid of Fuing Long. The Wu family hadn't even participated in the Dragon Vein War. My mother was already dead. What threat could they possibly face now? Wu Baohua kept his calm expression and repeated the same story. There was no Wu Wan in the Wu family. He said my mother's generation only had 3 males and no females in the family. He warned me that he was being patient because of my talent, but if I kept making trouble, he'd act. I looked at the young woman they called Xiaoyu, Wu Xiaoyu. I told Wu Baohua that her expression had given it away when I first said my mother's name. She clearly knew who Wu Wan was. Wu Baohua turned to her and asked if she'd told me such a thing. She shook her head fearfully and denied it. Wu Baohua smiled and told me I'd heard for myself. No Wu Wan. Something felt very wrong. The Wu family members didn't look at Wu Baohua with the normal respect children show their elder. They looked at him with fear, not the respectful kind, but the kind you see towards someone dangerous. I told Wu Baohua I'd test his strength then. I released my spiritual pressure onto him. His composure shattered. "You're a grandmaster?" he shouted. I frowned. I'd expected him to be the Wu family's grandmaster. But there was no spiritual force coming back at me. Only innate energy, and only at the greater achievement level. He was far from grandmaster. I asked where the Wu family's grandmaster was. Wu Baohua was shaking under my pressure, unable to break free. He screamed at Wu Yihai to go get your grandfather. Wu Yihai hesitated, looked between me and Wu Baohua, then hurried inside. A few minutes later, he came back supporting a white-haired old man. My frown deepened. This old man's spirit seemed broken. His hair was wild and loose, his eyes unfocused, drool hanging from the corner of his mouth. He looked like a madman, not a grandmaster. Wu Yihai whispered to him, "Great-grandfather, this person is bullying our family." The old man's aura suddenly exploded. He straightened his hunched body, broke free from Wu Yihai's support, and charged at me with a punch. I caught his fist easily. The force behind it was grandmaster level, but there was no innate energy, no spiritual power, just raw physical strength. His mind was gone, but his body still remembered how to fight. I pressed my spiritual force onto him and said sharply, "Wake up!" For one brief moment, his eyes cleared. He looked at me and asked, "Who are you?" Then the light faded and his eyes went cloudy again. He was back to being lost. "Wu Chonglu, what are you doing?" "Kill him already," Wu Baohua screamed from behind. That confirmed what I suspected. Wu Baohua was talking to this old man, supposedly his own father, like a dog. No son speaks to his father that way, especially not to the strongest person in the family. I looked at Wu Baohua and asked him directly, "Is this how you talk to your father? Or is he not your father at all? If he's not, then who are you? Why are you here in the Wu family?" I turned to the people behind him and asked if anyone could explain. Were they even real Wu family members? Who were these people? The tension at the gate became suffocating. Wu Baohua's face twisted, and he screamed for everyone to attack me. I told them calmly that anyone who moved would die. Nobody took a step. Their 2 strongest, Wu Baohua pinned by my spiritual force, and Wu Chonglu held by my hand, were both neutralized. No one was brave enough. I told them I'd start killing one person per minute until someone told me the truth. They could also try running if they wanted. I started a countdown on my phone. At the last few seconds, Wu Yihai looked around at the terrified family members, then at Wu Baohua on the ground, and said, "I'll talk." Wu Baohua screamed that he'd kill Wu Yihai if he said a word. I sealed Wu Baohua's mouth shut with spiritual force. Wu Yihai took a deep breath and said, "Wu Baohua is not my father. He's my cousin, my second grandfather's son." I cut him off and asked why he'd been calling Wu Baohua father then. Was he messing with me? Wu Yihai explained quietly that after Wu Baohua took control of the family, he forced everyone to call him father or grandfather. Every person behind him nodded in confirmation. Wu Yihai started explaining everything. He said I should already know about the Dragon Vein War 18 years ago, where Fu Yinglong destroyed 4 great families. Each family had a greater achievement grandmaster, and Fu Yinglong killed all 4. After that, the entire capital was terrified. Nobody dared associate with anyone connected to those families. That's when Wu Chonglu, the family patriarch, Wu Yihai's grandfather, discovered that the Wu family had a connection to the destroyed Yi family through my mother. The Fu family came to the Wu doorstep demanding her. The shock and rage caused Wu Chonglu to lose his mind. He'd been in that broken state ever since. Around that time, Wu Baohua, a cousin from a side branch who'd been traveling for years, came back. He was innate lesser achievement, which was strong enough to help stabilize things. Wu Yihai's father trusted him and let him manage family affairs temporarily while he personally went to Haicheng to find my mother. I interrupted and asked why I had no memory of this. Wu Yihai said I was only a few months old at the time. His father couldn't stay long because of Fu family surveillance. He only managed a quick visit and left my mother 10,000 yuan in cash. He didn't dare transfer money electronically. The plan was to bring us home once things calmed down. But things never calmed down. Fu Yinglong spent 5 years hunting every person connected to the 4 families. The Wu family lived in constant fear and never dared retrieve my mother. Then, in the 5th year, Wu Yihai's father learned the Fu family had found my mother's location and planned to kill her. What he said next made my head ring. Wu Yihai's father found a female death row prisoner to serve as a body double. He arranged for the truck driver to kill the substitute instead of my mother. Then he used his connections to falsify the autopsy report so the Fu family would believe my mother was dead. I could barely breathe. I asked the only question that mattered. "So my mother isn't dead?" Wu Yihai nodded. "My mother was alive. He'd been taking care of her all these years. She was his biological sister, his father's daughter. No matter what, their father couldn't watch his own child be killed." I stood there repeating the words to myself. "Not dead. She's not dead." I asked why she never came to find me in all these years. Wu Yihai looked at Wu Baohua and said that was where the story got ugly. The original plan was to wait for things to settle, then bring me back from the orphanage. My placement there was arranged by Wu Yihai's father, so I wouldn't get lost. But Wu Baohua discovered everything. He'd spent 5 years quietly poisoning Wu Yihai's father and scheming to take over. When he learned about my mother, he used it as leverage, threatening to tell Fu Yinglong unless he was given full control of the family. Wu Yihai's father tried to fight back, but the poison had destroyed half his cultivation. Wu Baohua killed him. Then he killed Wu Yihai's 2 older brothers and his mother too, leaving only Wu Yihai and the youngest generation alive. From that day on, he forced everyone to call him father and grandfather. He kept them around to maintain the Wu family's legitimate appearance for their allies, and to satisfy his own twisted need for people groveling before him. His own wife and children had been killed by enemies years ago. He had no real descendants. I asked where my mother was now. Wu Yihai said that when Wu Baohua killed his father, he realized the danger and secretly moved my mother to an apartment with a caretaker before Wu Baohua could find her. He held firm under interrogation, insisting his father had hidden her and nobody else knew where. As for why my mother never came looking for me, Wu Yihai told me I'd understand when I saw her. He said she didn't have the ability to come find me on her own. A cold feeling settled in my chest. That meant she was either sick or couldn't move. I looked at Wu Baohua pinned on the ground and asked him coldly if he was the reason my mother and I had been separated for 13 years. He had the nerve to call himself my second grandfather and tell me to watch my tone. I told him I didn't care if he was my grandfather or my great-grandfather. Anyone who kept me from my mother wouldn't be forgiven. I put a bolt of energy through his skull. The Wu family members stood frozen for a moment. Then relief flooded every face. Wu Baohua was dead. 13 years of tyranny, ended in 1 second. I asked Wu Yihai if anyone else was loyal to Wu Baohua. He shook his head. They'd all only obeyed him because they couldn't fight him. I told him to take me to my mother. He glanced at the coffin behind me and asked what to do with it. I looked at the black and white photo of my mother hanging on the front, took it out of the frame, and told him to dispose of the rest. If those weren't really her remains, there was no need for them. But I warned him. If he was lying, and those bones actually were my mother's, he'd share Wu Baohua's fate. He nodded and said, I know. Follow me. We walked out of the courtyard together. I followed Wu Yihai out of the courtyard. We took a taxi for about 10 minutes into an old, run-down neighborhood. When I saw the cluttered entrance of the apartment building, I asked him why he couldn't give my mother somewhere better to live. He said she refused to move. This was the apartment my mother and my real father had rented together when they were young. Their sweet little home, from when they were high school sweethearts, hiding their relationship from their families. We climbed to the 6th floor. Wu Yihai knocked. A middle-aged woman in an apron opened the door. Wang Yan, a former Wu family servant who'd been caring for my mother for 13 years. When Wu Yihai introduced me, she stared at me and said, You're Xiaowan's son? You've grown so much. She told me my mother had been talking about me for 13 years, crying every day while holding my childhood photos. She'd been having trouble sleeping lately, dreaming about her son, wanting to go to Haicheng to see me. Wu Yihai sent her out to buy groceries so we could have privacy. Then he knocked on a locked bedroom door. A weak voice answered from inside. Brother, I'm awake. Come in. That voice froze me where I stood. After all these years, my mother's voice was older, but still just as gentle as I remembered. Wu Yihai opened the door and told her to turn around and see who he'd brought. She was sitting on the bed, looking out the window. She asked if it was Xiao Yu again, come to cheer her up. She turned slowly. When she saw me, she went completely still. Her hand reached out, trembling. Manhwa, is that you? You came back? She started crying. She wiped her tears and looked at me again. Manhwa, you're still so young. After all these years, you finally came to see me. She thought I was my father. I called out softly, Mom. It's me. I'm Wu Dao. She froze. Her hand hung in the air. Then it hit her. Wu Dao. My Wu Dao. My boy. She burst into sobs and tried to stand up. Her legs gave out, and she fell back onto the bed. Even falling, she kept calling my name. I rushed over and caught her. She cupped my face with shaking hands, studying every detail, crying harder. You really are my Wu Dao. You look just like your father. She held me tight. My son, you've suffered. I'm so sorry. Then she gasped, her body seizing up. She'd gotten too excited. Her heart was racing out of control. I quickly pushed a stream of innate energy into her body to stabilize her pulse. After a while, she opened her eyes again. This time she was calmer. She just kept touching my face, afraid I might disappear. She said she was sorry, over and over. I told her I wasn't suffering. I just missed her. Wu Yihai explained to her that I'd come on my own, that I was a grandmaster now, and that I'd killed Wu Baohua. The family was free. She was stunned. She stared at me, opened her mouth as if to say something, then swallowed it. She asked how I became a grandmaster at 18. I smiled and said it was just luck. I didn't want to upset her with the details of what happened in Haicheng. Not with Wu Yihai standing right there, and not when she might get too emotional again. I looked at her legs. I asked what happened. She tried to brush it off, but Wu Yihai told her to explain. She said that after her father brought her back to the capital, she tried to escape out a window to come find me. She slipped and fell. The bones healed, but the nerves were damaged. It gradually worsened into paralysis. She looked at me with guilt and said if she could have walked, she would have come to Haicheng years ago. I told her it was fine. I was here now. I checked her legs with my spiritual power. Several meridians below her hips were broken, but the damage wasn't nearly as bad as Li Huai's had been. 2 drops of stalactite liquid would fix her completely. I pulled out the last bottle from my storage ring, pretending to take it from my pocket, and dripped 1 drop into her mouth. I noticed Wu Yihai's eyes light up when he saw the jade bottle. I could hear the greed in his voice when he asked if it was the legendary stalactite liquid. I put the bottle away immediately. If I left it with my mother, Wu Yihai would find a way to take it. He was my uncle, and he'd looked after my mother for 13 years. But I didn't feel close to him. I didn't feel close to any of the Wu family. They were broken, weak, and I didn't trust them. After a few minutes, my mother excitedly said she could feel tingling in her feet for the first time in years. I told her the effect would keep working, and in a few days she'd probably be able to stand. She thanked me with tears in her eyes and said she felt terrible that after owing me for so many years, she was still relying on me. I told her she was my mother. She gave me life and raised me. Everything I did was natural. Then I noticed something. Earlier, when she first saw me, she called me Jinhua, my father's name. And she said, "You came back," as if she'd been expecting him to return someday. If my father died 18 years ago, why would she say that? I asked her quietly, "Mom, is my father Yi Jinhua still alive?" Fear flashed across her face. She shook her head quickly. No. I held her hand and told her gently that she could tell me. I was strong enough now. I didn't fear Fu Yinglong. She clenched her fists. I could see her torn between two things. Her son she'd been separated from for 13 years and something else. Someone else. In the end, she shook her head again. "No, your father died 18 years ago." She was lying. I was sure of it, but I didn't push her. Not today. I could see my mother didn't want to tell me, so I didn't force her. I pulled out my phone and called Li Huai. I told him to look into my real father, Yi Jinhua. I believed he was still alive. Find out where he was. Wu Yihai overheard and asked if this was the same Li Huai from the capital's Li family 18 years ago. He said they went to the same high school. Li Huai was famous back then, a genius nicknamed capital's Zhuge Liang. The Fu family never found his body after the massacre, and Fu Yinglong was furious. Wu Yihai was surprised he'd ended up in Haicheng, working under me. He carefully tried to encourage my mother to tell me the truth. He pointed out that Li Huai wouldn't have come to the capital unless he believed I could handle Fu Yinglong. This was her chance for the family to reunite. My mother looked at me for a long time. She told me to run if I couldn't win, that Fu Yinglong was more dangerous than we imagined, and Li Huai had been away from the capital too long to properly judge the situation. I leaned close and whispered in her ear so Wu Yihai couldn't hear. I told her I was above the Grandmaster realm. Dealing with Fu Yinglong would be easy. Her eyes went wide. She asked if I was serious. I nodded. She took a breath and told me the truth. My father was probably still alive. Fu Yinglong had him locked deep underground beneath the Forbidden Palace, inside the Dragon Vein. In fact, many people from the 4 destroyed families were still alive down there. The story that Fu Yinglong killed everyone wasn't entirely true. Li Huai had been sent away before the end and didn't know what happened after. Fu Yinglong only killed the Grandmaster-level fighters. The rest were kept as prisoners because the Fu family needed them. Only people with the bloodline of the 4 guardian families could extract dragon energy from the vein. Without them, Fu Yinglong couldn't access it. My father was only at the acquired entry level back then, too weak to be worth killing, but useful as a blood source. She said she wasn't certain he was alive, only that she suspected it. I told her that whether he was dead or alive, I was going to the Forbidden Palace tonight. She squeezed my hand and told me to be careful. I spent the rest of the day with her. I could see she was in terrible shape, skin deathly pale, almost no flesh on her bones, getting winded just from talking. Years of being confined indoors with paralyzed legs had wrecked her health. Even after the stalactite liquid, her condition was concerning. At noon, Wu Yihai joined us for lunch, then left to deal with Wu family matters now that Wu Baoguo was dead. Once he was gone, I could speak freely with my mother about everything that happened in Haicheng. At 6 in the evening, I said goodbye. She reminded me again. Fu Yinglong hadn't left the Dragon Vein in 7 or 8 years. He might have already broken through to the level above Grandmaster. Her final words were the same. "If you can't win, run." I promised I would. After leaving the apartment, I called Li Huai. "Meet me at the Forbidden Palace gate." I flew there using my phone's navigation. The Forbidden Palace, the old Imperial Palace, was the largest building complex on all of Blue Star. It was still magnificent after over 100 years. But now Fu Yinglong controlled it, or more accurately, he controlled the Dragon Vein entrance underneath the palace's central point. Most of the palace was empty. Even the Fu family couldn't fill it, and nobody wanted to live there with poor water and electricity. I landed at the gate and found Li Huai waiting. He briefed me on what he'd gathered from the black market. His old contacts in the capital were mostly dead, cleaned out by the Fu family years ago, so information was limited. The key facts: Fu Yinglong was deep inside the Dragon Vein and hadn't been seen in 7 or 8 years. The dragon energy had produced an extraordinary number of Grandmasters for the Fu family. They now had 2 peak Grandmasters besides Fu Yinglong himself, 3 greater achievement, 5 lesser achievement, and over 10 entry-level Grandmasters. Across all of Blue Star, there were fewer than 10 peak Grandmasters total. The Fu family alone had 2, not even counting Fu Yinglong, who was classified above that level as one of the 3 supreme masters. The Fu family was the undisputed #1 family on the planet. The other 2 supreme masters and their forces couldn't compete. All 20-plus grandmasters were deep inside the dragon vein, absorbing dragon energy, getting stronger every day. Rumors said Fu Yinglong might have already broken through to the level above grandmaster. I narrowed my eyes. 20-plus grandmasters was terrifying. And if Fu Yinglong had spent 8 years in the dragon vein, he might truly have reached the condensation realm. The key to that breakthrough was figuring out how to transform energy into liquid form. Even without a proper technique, someone could manage it through sheer accumulation over time. I looked at the palace gates and told Li Huai I'd wrap him in my spiritual power and bring him inside. He should stay behind me. Once I cleared the way, he could follow. He nodded. We both knew tonight would be the hardest fight yet. The question was whether one condensation realm cultivator could overpower 20-plus grandmasters. I spread my spiritual force around Li Huai and flew toward the dragon vein.